that would be appreciated. Otherwise, they're going to have to come up to the lectern to testify. Second, if you are speaking, you are welcome to take your mask off. I would ask that you keep about 1 hand length away from the microphone. Inevitably, someone tonight is going to screw up, as has happened with every single city agency, and I will politely interrupt you. Inevitably, it will happen a second and third time, and it will happen with every other city agency this evening, or for the rest of the week. All right, so with that, and folks, I know we have a number of members from the public here this evening. I want to point one thing out. So we have, this is budget week. The only evening that we take public testimony for this is at Baltimore City Council Taxpayers Night. So the only folks that will be testifying this evening will be members of the agency, at the discretion of the head of the agency, which in this case is the state's attorney, and members of the city council. So I'll get to the flow of the hearing in a moment. But we will not be taking public testimony. The opportunity to provide public testimony was on Thursday, May 26th. So I just want to make sure everyone is clear on that. Is there anyone that doesn't understand that? All right, very good. Okay, Ways and Means Committee. I'm Eric Costello, councilman from the 11th District, chair of the committee. Joined to my immediate left, vice chair of the committee, Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District, member of the committee. To his left, Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District, and Councilman Zeke Cohen, 1st District, and Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District, member of the committee. To my right, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District, Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District, member of the committee, and Councilwoman Danny McCray, 2nd District. Joining us on behalf of Mayor Brandon Scott, I think we have Sophia G. this evening. And joining us on behalf of Council President Nick Mosby, Nate Poole. And we will have other staffers periodically on behalf of Mayor Brandon Scott, as well as Council President Nick Mosby. Also joining us, Councilman Antonio Glover, 13th District. To my immediate right is Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee. So what we're going to do tonight, which is what we have done for all of the other agencies that we sent a letter to. First, I just want to confirm you have a 3-slide presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And that's based on the number of services within your budget book. So I'm going to ask you to do your presentation. First, I'm going to ask for you to introduce the members of your team that may be testifying this evening.
The only thing I would say...
Microphone. Yep.
The only thing that I would caution is that my entire division chiefs are in attendance, as they typically are at these budget hearings. And so I'm not sure, depending on the question, whether or not they would testify. So what we can do is to introduce every division chief so that you know who's here. Would that work?
Yeah.
And the only other thing, Mr. Chair, is that I did intend to address the council before we go into the presentation, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So what we'll do is, first we'll do introductions. So Madam State's Attorney, you can introduce yourself. I'm blanking on your name, ma'am.
Camille Blakefall.
Yes, ma'am. So you can introduce them, and then what we're going to do is we're going to ask, so you don't have to name all of them, we're just going to ask you to come up single file and come up to this microphone. Again, make sure your mouth is about a hand length away. Introduce yourselves. And then once that's finished, we're going to go over to the state's attorney. She has an introductory statement. Then we're going to jump through the slides, the slide deck. Then we're going to go through the letter, which is what we've done for the other 6 agencies that we've sent letters to so far. And then we will get into questions and answers for the session. Okay. Everyone good? All right, excellent. Turn it over to you, Madam State's Attorney.
Thank you. I guess I'll start.
Oh, and you can sit there if you want. That microphone should be on, or you can go up to the lectern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the purposes of the council, I'm Marilyn Mosby, State's Attorney for Baltimore City, and I'll allow Camille Blakefall to introduce herself, and all of the members of my team, if you guys can just come up, say what division, your name, and what division you represent, okay?
Good evening. I'm Camille Blake-Fowl, Chief Administrative Officer for the Office of the State's Attorney for Baltimore City.
Good evening. I'm Jan Bledsoe,
Well-
Chief Deputy.
Handful away. Is it?
Good? Most people can hear me anyway. I'm Jan Bledsoe. I'm the Chief Deputy.
Just loud, because the reason we're asking you to do that is because the folks that are at home depend on the microphone in order to be able to hear you, and we also archive these hearings. Thank you, Ms. Bledsoe.
Jennifer Haslam, Director of Legislative Affairs.
Good afternoon. Becky Feldman, Chief of the Sentencing Review Unit and the Interim Strategic Policy and Planning Director.
Hello, my name is Noelle Newman. I am Deputy State's Attorney, Deputy of Operations.
Good evening. Kurt Bjorklund, Deputy State's Attorney for Major Crimes. Nice to see you.
Good evening. I'm Zai Richardson. I'm the Chief of Communications.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Banks. I'm the Chief of the Felony Trial Unit.
Good evening, Michelle Lambert. I'm the Division Chief of the Special Victims Unit.
Good evening. Sandra Goldthorpe, Chief of the Evidence Review Unit.
Good evening. Patrick Gracie. I'm the Chief of the Gun Violence Enforcement Division.
Good evening. Justin Dickman, Building Chief of Wabash District Courthouse.
Good evening. Alex Rodriguez, Chief of the Economic Crimes Unit.
Good evening. Michael Dunte, Chief of the Homicide Unit.
Good evening. Don Walter, Chief of Juvenile.
Good evening. Angel White, Director of Crime Control and Prevention.
Good evening, council members. My name is Steve Troso. I'm the Chief of the Police Integrity Unit.
Good evening. I'm Dave Owens, Chief of the Misdemeanor Jury Trial Unit.
Good evening. I'm Michael Leedy. I'm Director of Training.
Hello, everyone, and good evening. Murphy Hartford, Chief of Criminal Strategies Unit, Major Investigative Unit, and Narcotics.
Good evening. Arcelia Green, Director of Victim Witness Services Unit.
Good evening. Esmery Stevenson, Chief of External Affairs, Victim Services, Crime Control and Prevention, Communications.
Darren O'Brien, MIS, Management Information Systems.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman Costello, of course, Councilmember Burnett. I know that he was supposed to be here, right? He's not here in attendance, but
He had a little life event. He had a baby
it's okay.
a couple days
It
ago.
happens. I understand. Councilmember Dorsey, Councilmember McCray, Middleton. I see Schleifer's not here either, and Councilman Stokes, Dorsey, Antonio Glover. Again, Odette Ramos. In the words of Councilman Zeke Cohen at my daughter's 8th grade graduation today, I won't let others define, that's the media or anyone else, define my narrative. In your letter, Mr. Chair, you asked for clarity surrounding rumors and intentionally peddled misinformation reported by the media alleging that my prosecutorial units are understaffed by more than 50%. Some reports and anonymous people are alleging that my office is down 100 plus attorneys, 80 plus attorneys, none of which is true. So before I dispel this myth, I would like to clarify some of the misguided and politically charged rumors surrounding my office and my prosecutors. As you're aware, Baltimore City has faced unprecedented challenges and expansive instability in the past 7 years, which include the constant change in leadership, of 4 different mayors, 5 different police commissioners, the untimely killing of Freddie Gray, the subsequent uprising, a scathing 163-page Department of Justice report exposing a pattern and practice of discriminatory policing, the subsequent federal consent decree, dealing with the aftermath of one of the largest police corruption scandals in the history of the country, where rogue police officers were planting guns and drugs on citizens for decades. And on top of that, council members, withstanding court closures for more than 2 years, case backlogs, staffing, and budgetary challenges due to a global pandemic and its aftermath. Despite all of the aforementioned challenges, every day my highly skilled and talented prosecutors who stand behind me today and lead a number of prosecutors in my office who are overworked and underpaid. And I need to emphasize this because this is incredibly important, even according to the Baltimore Human Resources Division. And we can send you the emails that have dictated that my attorneys are understaffed and overworked and underpaid, which came to us last year. Despite all of that, they dedicate their lives to the pursuit of justice on behalf of the citizens of Baltimore City. As you will see from the data provided, every single day my prosecutors go up against voluminous case dockets, uncooperative witnesses, and demanding judges to ensure accountability against violent individuals in the city. For the past 7 years, my office and my prosecutors, I would argue, have been the only stability in the city, and they have been valued and appreciated for the public service and commitment that each of them exhibit every day. They haven't necessarily been valued, but they should be. I will not allow my prosecutors, of course, as the head of the agency, to be scapegoated, and I'm not saying by this council at all, but by the media or anyone else, political opponents. I will not allow my prosecutors to be scapegoated for the violence that currently exists and has existed prior to my tenure due to the disinvestment and failed tough on crime policies that led to major corruption scandals that we are all aware of. Despite all of the aforementioned challenges, my office has maintained, and this is critical because I need you guys to understand and recognize this is the outcome. My office has maintained a 90% conviction rate on average for violent offenses, an average of 88% conviction rate for mandatory minimum eligible cases, and a 92% conviction rate for violent repeat offenders, all of which is consistent with the conviction rates of my predecessors over the past 10 years. Further illustrating our ability to meet the challenges outside of the scope of our purview, our no-pros and stet rate is still consistent with the last 10 years, despite all of the challenges that we just spoke about. I have the best and the brightest prosecutors in the country. But the pandemic malaise, work-life balance, and fair pay, those 3 factors, have become paramount in these years since 2020. As a result, many employees across the country are taking steps to reset their lives by leaving their current jobs, lending to what has been coined, not by me, but nationally as the Great Resignation. And this is not just a one moment in time event. As was recently reported as of January 2022, more than 4.3 million people have quit their jobs, a trend that began in 2020 and continues to this day. The Great Resignation has had an impact across the nation and touched all levels of employment, including public and private sector, and in particular, the legal profession. As the New York Times recently wrote, new burdens, low pay, and pandemic malaise prompted the resignations of 1/5 of the legal workforce in Manhattan, the Bronx, and Brooklyn. The SAO is facing the same challenges that all city agencies and state agencies are facing currently. The SAO, though, in particular, faces all these challenges during this critical time when my prosecutors are also facing higher caseloads as a result of the court being shut down for more than 2 years. Once the courts fully reopened in March of 2022, this year, and criminal trials resumed, the SAO staff were forced to contend with a backlog of thousands of criminal cases that we anticipated. This backlog has resulted in subsequently higher caseloads per assistant state's attorney, which in turn contributes to a daily workload that makes achieving healthy work-life balance incredibly challenging. And while the SAO requires a higher caseload than other county counterparts, we also operate on a budget that does not provide for competitive salaries. This leaves many departures from the office due to higher paying job offers at law firms, other prosecutors' offices in other counties. I would note that we have had 4 state's attorneys, elected state's attorneys that have come from my office that actively recruit from my office. And where these attorneys often find lighter caseloads, improved work-life balance, and better compensation consistent with the Pew Research Center's April 22, 2022 findings that most people leaving their current jobs are leaving for higher pay. And a recent review of just the past 14 state's attorney's office staff who resigned in the last 3 months, none of whom are anonymous. We're gonna deal with people, real people today, with political motives. When none of these folks are anonymous with political motives 6 weeks from my election, the primary reasons that they left have been the unsustainable increased caseloads made worse by the attrition rate and the COVID-19 backlog, wage compression and compensation, and the lack of work-life balance. Additionally, 5 of these individuals left for the Maryland State Attorney General's office, 4 left for private firms, 2 left for state's attorneys' offices in other counties. Again, 4 of whom have become state's attorney directly from my office, and 1 of whom went to the federal practice, and 1 finally started their own private practice. Anticipating the likely challenges we would be facing coming out of a global pandemic where the courts were shut down for 2 years, I sought assistance from the city to be able to offer my assistant state's attorneys better wages to increase retention last year. In response to and after thorough review of our office's assistant state's attorney pay scale, the City Department of Human Resources, not me, independently, the City Department of Human Resources recommended increased salaries for the prosecutors and the state's attorney's office felony units. This recommendation was based on the scope of work of the assistant state's attorneys in specific units within the state's attorney's office, and with the understanding that these prosecutorial roles are difficult to fill positions in critical areas, such as homicide and felony trial units. DHR, if I can use that, Department of Human Resources, noted that the state's attorney's office experienced attrition due to its uncompetitive salaries, and further explained that other agencies had received increases for their staff needs during that time period. However, the SAO did not receive the full funding it requested for salary increases from the city, notwithstanding DHR's recommendations. To ensure retention of our felony prosecutors in accordance with DHR recommendations, we were somewhat forced to eliminate 5 critical assistant state's attorney positions, generating $536,333 in general funds to provide salary increases that are in line with DHR's recommendations. We then later requested that BBMR to utilize our budget surplus, because we've had a surplus. I have an outstanding administrative team that makes sure that we tighten up and we cross our T's and dot our I's. We asked to utilize our budget surplus from the current fiscal year to fund these increases that were recommended by DHR, and again, we were denied. Lastly, in December of 2021, we made a formal request to BBMR where we again highlighted the need for salary increases to address retention issues, as was recommended by DHR. Nevertheless, we were denied. In spite of all these unprecedented challenges that I've spoken of, as you can see by the State Attorney's Office conviction rates, and I'll get into those, we already talked about a little bit of them, we are continually holding offenders accountable to apply one standard of justice for the city we love. And while the media intentionally reports on the problem and fails to report on the outcome, my office started a conviction alert system I hope that each of you get those alerts on your cell phone, because I've made sure that you get them, that should alert you each and every time we receive a conviction and we publish it, because unfortunately it's not carried through the media. Per your request, what you will see is that we have filled currently 103 ASA positions. We have filled 41 chief state's attorney positions. That's all of 144 filled positions, which is not what has been reported through the media, even despite the fact that we have said that you are erroneous about your numbers. The vacant ASA positions are 42, vacant CSA positions are 6. That's a total of 48 positions. That, in all honesty, is less than 73 vacancies at the height of our staffing. We typically run between 193. At the max, we've run 217. That's a difference at the height of where we are staffing-wise is 73, which is still 26% of our workforce. But when you consider the fact that we usually run 191 attorneys in our office, it's about 24% of our workforce. Finally, I wanted to address Councilman's letter, which requests specific staffing details for various units within the State's Attorney's Office. The information that I provided reflects by a continued commitment to focus on the office efforts on addressing crime that pose a threat to public safety. When I announced in 2020 that the State's Attorney's Office would no longer prosecute certain low-level offenses, minor offenses that we believed had nothing to do with public safety, and Johns Hopkins has confirmed, when we made those decisions and we made them permanent, we were able to reprioritize scarce law enforcement resources to focus on pursuing violent individuals. The net effect of these policies changes. However, substantially lower caseloads for my prosecutors, it resulted in lower caseloads for my prosecutors in district court. In 2014, district court prosecutors had a cumulative caseload of 27,000 cases, compared to 2021, where there is a cumulative caseload of 10,143 cases, a decrease of more than 50%. This trend continues in 2022, where there is currently a caseload of 4,475 cases. It's important to note that while the caseloads have decreased, the assistant state's attorneys are required to staff district court each day. Because of this, as previous administrations have done, my office uses a rotation of volunteer currently, until we can fill these vacancies, uses a rotation of volunteer assistant state's attorneys from felony units and supervisors in the misdemeanor jury trial division to assist in staffing district court dockets. Our priority is always going to be, and will continue to be, violent crimes. So what you will see in the letter are, and we can go through each and every one of them, homicide. In 2021, there were 12 individuals staffed, now there are 13. Gun violence enforcement, there were 6, now there are 7. Special victims, there were 7, now there's 10. Felony, there were 7, now there's 8. Narcotics, MIU and CSU, we can talk about the combining of those units. There was 10, we have now 8. Conviction integrity unit, this is the reinvestigations into claims of actual innocence. We had 3 individuals, we now have 4. Public trust and police integrity, we had 5 in 2021. Right now, we're actively recruiting, and we like to do that outside of the scope of the state's attorney's office because of the unique nature of that unit. We have 3. Misdemeanor jury trial, we had 10 in 2021. We have 7 right now. Economic crimes, we have 1. Again, this was always a unit that was rather sparse, and we have a vacancy there. Evidence review, we had 6. We now have paralegals. We intend to staff that unit with our paralegals. The sentencing review unit is run by our 1 individual. We have reached out and received resources and grants to attempt to staff that unit more than just 1 person. Juvenile, we had 2. We now have 8. District court, we had 16. We now have 10. And special victims unit, we had 3 in 2021, we now have 3 this year as well. Before I get into anything else and turn it over to Camille, before we go into the slides, The one thing that I will focus on, and as you can see in your letter, as figures 3 and 4 show, our conviction rates reflect. We have effectively staffed our divisions in both 2021 and 2022. Unfortunately, resignations will continue if we do not address the issues my office faces when it comes to its inability to offer competitive salaries and fair work-life balance coming out of a global pandemic. Without a wholesale revamping of the State's Attorney's Office, salary structure and pay scales, which I have to say is currently underway by the Department of Human Resources, approved by the City Council and the Mayor's Office, attorneys and other essential staff will continue to seek out employment elsewhere where they are paid more and work less. My office must be afforded the financial tools needed to remain competitive and attract the best talent. When you asked about the American Rescue Plan Act funds, the State's Attorney's Office has made one request in regards to the funds from the American Rescue Plan Act received by the city in the fall of 2021. Our understanding was that the funds from the ARPA should not be utilized to provide for wage increases, which is the paramount need of the State's Attorney's Office. With this in mind, in December of 2021, my office requested that ARPA funding be awarded to support local organizations doing important work in the city. Organizations that meet the needs of individuals in the community who are dealing with trauma, mental health crises, substance use issues, housing issues, and more. This need was even noted this week by Councilman Cohen, where he said we are facing a profound mental health crisis in Baltimore. Deaths from violence and overdoses are staggering. The war on drugs was catastrophic failure. Addiction is a disease. We should cure it through public health approaches. I agree with this assessment, I would say, and this is why I ask that services that our community has said for decades are essential be supported by the ARPA funds. Specifically, the State's Attorney's Office requested funding to be provided to the Baltimore Crisis Response Incorporated, People Encouraging People Incorporated, Powell Recovery Incorporated, Turnaround, Community Resource Centers, security cameras for residents in high-crime neighborhoods, and other local community organizations that address the behavioral health, substance use, and improve the quality of life needs such as housing and youth recreation centers. Our request regarding the use of ARPA funds outlined an opportunity to kind of rethink public health and public safety in the city. These organizations clearly would benefit greatly from the ARPA funds funding support while providing the community with access to resources and much needed services, and I continue to wholeheartedly support my earlier request to the mayor. With regard to your recruitment efforts, and I wanted to be able to address all of these concerns up front, and we can then take questions if you'd like. While I believe that with time, the challenges the State's Attorney's Office face will improve and ultimately stabilize, I have also put in place a number of incentives in order to retain and to attract talent. We modified our in-person work schedule to allow staff, the entirety of our staff, to work from home 2 days a week. We provided every staff member, including support staff, with laptops to accommodate the flexibility of their work schedules. We have advocated for and are currently working with the city's DHR to ensure an agency-wide parity assessment. And finally, we have created a recruitment and retention work group that targets local and national law schools and public interest fairs. While these efforts are successful, they are not sustainable in the current landscape. Other employers offer less work and more pay, and they are, simply put, making better offers. So while the State Attorney's Office may offer a great depth of experience, the low wages and the high caseloads are the primary reason we are not able to recruit and retain staff at the rate that we need. In conclusion, I'm saddened and horrified, as all of you are, at the crippling level of violence in Baltimore. It's unconscionable that people in our community would continue to face this level of violence. It is clear that the sense of hopelessness that exists in the city exists because of and due to over 20% of Baltimore's population living in poverty and nearly 1 out of 3 of our children living below poverty. The unemployment rate, as you all are aware, for young African American men between the ages of 18 and 24 is more than twice as high than that compared to others. Decades of disinvestment has led to over 18,000 vacant houses, 16,000 vacant lots that exist exclusively within neighborhoods of color. It is a problem that grows with each year, and it's still not addressed. We cannot criminalize our way out of the problems that we face in our city caused by this disinvestment in our city and the resources that would help address the root causes of crime. The answers to these solutions are not easy, and they will not likely be quickly resolved, as each of you know. I remain in full support of the need to increase investment in the root causes of violence in the Baltimore City, and believe it is also imperative that we, and I say we, the mayor, as well as the city council, fully fund our prosecutorial efforts, which we are currently not doing, in order to ensure even greater accountability in the courtroom. I will now turn it over to my Chief of Administration, Camille Blakefall, who will answer any of the specifics of the proposed fiscal year 21 budget and go through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, State's Attorney Mosby. The fiscal year FY2023 budget is the one that is before you this year for consideration. I will run you quickly through our slides. They're just 3 slides. Our service areas have remained the same. We have prosecution of criminals at 115. Let me move it. Our second is, and I will go back and talk about these in greater depth. Why isn't this moving? Our second service is 781, administration, and our final service is 786, victim and witness services. They are all under the mayor's pillar of public safety. And so again, I will go over them briefly. Service number 115 is always our largest service. It's where all of the salaries for our most of our staff lives. You will notice that this year our budget has increased by 3% overall. We don't have a budget slide, but you have it in the budget book. We have increased our general fund by 3% rather, and we have seen some increases on both the federal and state grants, thanks to the work of Jennifer Haslam in the Policy and Legislative Affairs Division. And so we continue to pursue federal and state grants to support our work, and some of the increase, the bottom line increase for FY23 is reflective of that. But our general fund increase has gone up 3%, largely to reflect the changes in fringe benefits, cost of living, those sorts of things. It's pretty straightforward. I have here main budget items. One of the things that, one of the major budget items that was identified in our budget book this year in our agency detail was the recommended budget in FY22 to increase the salaries of 42 assistant state's attorneys. These costs were largely offset by the $500,000, give or take, that we garnered from these freezes, but I must note that the mayor did give us $92,478 for the 17 homicide attorneys, but did not give us additional funding to increase the salaries of any of the other felony units, and that's why we had to sort of dip into our ASA line items and freeze, basically cannibalize ourselves and freeze 5 positions for the purpose of getting our felony attorneys sort of a living wage, is the way I like to see it. The state's attorney has talked a lot about the concerns about our ongoing efforts over the last year to work with agencies within the mayor's office to try to both raise this issue and ultimately get those salaries in place. DHR has been a great partner. I want to be clear, they're always, as has BBMR, to the extent that they felt that they could be. However, ultimately, at the end of the day, we've been met with some frustration, and we still are carrying really uncompetitive salaries across the board. But Currently, as the state's attorney highlighted, we are in conversations with DHR to do a long-term salary study to really move the bands for all of our assistant state's attorneys and chief state's attorneys and bring the baseline up. And that will allow us to sort of get a more competitive wage. It still won't compete with the private sector or even the federal government, but it will be more than it is now. I'll move to, this thing sticks. Yep, 781 is the next slide. That slide is a much smaller amount. That slide is really where you find, as you might imagine, all of our administrative expenditures, our grants management, personnel management, policy and legislative affairs, where we coordinate interagency partnerships, projects, and actually of interest to you maybe, this is the service where all of our body-worn camera personnel and technology needs lives. So this is sort of the service number that where you'll see an increase in those numbers from year to year. And you'll notice that this year we requested and received a $15,000 infusion to our budget to replace a really outdated phone system at the district court. And we also continue to carry and have for many years $232,000 for the implementation of a new electronic courts management system, MDEC. We ourselves and Prince George's County are the only two counties out of the 23 counties and Baltimore City that aren't on board with MDEC, and from year to year they roll over the implementation, largely because those jurisdictions are massive and the rollover will be massive, but BBMR works with us to continually just roll those over year after year with the hope that that will be the fiscal year that the state will actually get that up and running for the remaining two jurisdictions. And then finally, 786 is our last service, Victim and Witness Services. You all are very familiar with that. Arcelia Green introduced herself, as did Marie Stevenson. They work on those issues, and this service supports full-time personnel who assist victims and witnesses of crime in Baltimore City by providing counseling and guidance, notification of rights and support in court, and overseeing monetary support and reimbursement. We have a really robust monetary support system for victims and witnesses of crime, and we continually do fundraising efforts as well as seek support from outside organizations to help us do that work. And we are recommending for FY23 that the budget service level remains the same. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Madam State's Attorney, thank you for responding to the committee's letter on time. I appreciate it. The issues that I want to discuss around, the committee wants to discuss around staffing, they're not issues that are new to the committee. I think you are our 35th or 37th agency that we've had this week. We've got another half dozen to go. And the concerns that you've raised, specifically around COVID, retention, those are a common theme that we've heard this past week. Nonetheless, there is a sense of urgency on behalf of the committee, specific to the fact that this is related to public safety, as is the other two agencies that we sent letters to in public safety, MONSE and the Baltimore Police Department. The narrative around the request for additional funds dating back to December of last year was very helpful. I've had an opportunity to talk with Bureau of Budget and Management Research. All of this seems to make sense. My understanding is that you made a request of the mayor, and the BBMR, the budget office, worked with you and proposed eliminating, or not freezing, but eliminating 5 pins and taking the cost savings from that, which is approximately $536,000, and permitting you to redistribute that to increases in salary, permanent increases in salary to your attorneys or ASAs. Can you explain to us the criteria that was used to determine which of those positions were going to receive that increase?
So what I can...
Mike. You can sit there if you want, or you can get up, but either way, just use the mic, please.
So there was a specific criteria that was used by DHR to determine what, and it had to do with the level of experience of the attorneys. It had to do with their caseload. If you look at my homicide prosecutors, these attorneys are on call 24 hours. It's a little different from the district court prosecutors that are not necessarily on call 24 hours, but they did it based off of the critical needs of these positions. And so that criteria we can spell out for you. I can give that to you in a separate sort of document. But that was a consideration that was made by DHR when they made the recommendation for the increases. The problem was that the mayor's office came in and said, we can only give you this set amount for your homicide prosecutors. That left a deficit, so that is the reason why we had to abolish. And we didn't freeze, we abolished 5 positions in order to increase the salaries of those additional attorneys. But what it also created was, because it wasn't a citywide sort of analysis or an agency-wide analysis, it created additional pay parity issues. And so what we asked DHR and what they said that they were willing to do is to do that assessment. And that's what they're currently doing, and that's what we're trying to figure out right now, is how, despite the fact that we had the surplus, despite the fact that we made the request from the mayor and was denied, despite all of that, or we were told that we didn't have the funds to be able to increase the salaries. We are looking at freezing now additional positions so that we can bring those salaries up and that they are commensurate with my colleagues across the state and across the country who are all dealing with the same issue.
So, thank you. And my understanding is that there's an additional request into BBMR, which went in on or around May 30th for a similar action in terms of freezing and or eliminating PINs. Is that correct?
Yes. So that's what we asked DHR and BBMR, if we can do the same thing that we did last fall and try to freeze as opposed to abolish. Before we had to abolish those positions. And we are asking, can we freeze those positions in lieu of the fact that we have to fill those vacancies? It won't likely be filled in the fiscal year, but can we fill those vacancies? If we don't fill those vacancies, can we utilize that to freeze those positions and ensure that we can increase the salaries of those individuals that are dedicated and come to work every single day and should be paid the way that others in their field are paid?
And the request was for 5 positions?
No, it wasn't for 5 positions. And Camille can speak specifically to what the exact request is, but it was to freeze 5 positions. That would cover several positions and bringing pay parity up. And so I think it covered an additional, what was the number?
Yeah, there are 100 positions to raise, and we are requesting and received approval from BBMR to freeze 5 more positions. We're also going to be using funds from the mayor's office, the homicide funds, and for a total of, we need about $600,000, and the combination of the money that we haven't spent on the homicide, for the homicide lawyers and our freeze will get us there.
So just to confirm, the action that you requested and was granted last December, or let me restate that. The action that was taken last December to eliminate 5 PINs resulted in a cost savings of $536,000, which was distributed as permanent pay raises to 42 of the ASAs based on that criteria. And Matt and Sophia, we want to get as a takeaway from the state's attorney's office that criteria that was used to determine how the cost savings from the 5 PINs was determined, how those 42 ASAs were determined. You guys both good on that?
Councilman Costello, could you clarify the request? You want to know for each of the 42 ASAs?
No. Oh, no. Let me.
How we decided.
5 positions.
Yeah, let me clarify. You have 100 some odd filled ASA positions. 42 of that some odd positions received a permanent pay increase as a result of the cost savings of $536,000 that were achieved from the action to eliminate 5 pins. What I'm asking for is, please explain to me and I think the state's attorney was explaining this, please explain to me the criteria that was used to determine which of the ASAs would receive the pay raises, and it so happens that 42 of them met whatever criteria was determined between SAO, DHR, and BBMR. So I'm interested in seeing the criteria that was used
by DHR. We can get that to you.
It was by DHR?
It was DHR made the determination. They did an independent sort of review. And so, yes, we can get you the criteria that they utilized for their recommendation.
Thank you. And so there's a second request in now.
Yes.
Which is for $600,000 total.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
To further increase permanent salaries of ASAs.
Of everyone else. We made a request in between that time, Mr. Chair, for $1.7 million to be able to have pay parity across the agency, and that was denied. And so what we are attempting to do is to fill in the void and say, okay, well, we need to increase the salaries. We have to be competitive with all of these other agencies that are soliciting, directly soliciting and recruiting our attorneys. And so, yes, that's what we're asking of DHR and BBMR.
Okay. So there are 103 filled ASA positions currently.
Yes.
42 of those 103 positions received raises. The $600,000 is intended to provide permanent raises to the remaining 61 ASAs. Is that correct?
So let me be clear, it's not just ASAs, right? It may have been chief state's attorneys that we also put in a request for. So altogether, we have 144 individuals that are in the positions. 42 of those positions, some of whom have since left, but again creates a parity issue because once they leave, we promote someone else. They are now doing the work of that other individual and are entitled to the same compensation as that other individual. It's creating the same sort of issue. And so, yes, the additional funds are to ensure agency-wide that we have pay parity among all of our attorneys.
Okay, so just to summarize, the universe of 42 individuals that received pay raises, those were all ASAs, correct?
They were ASAs and CSAs.
ASAs and CSAs.
Yes.
Okay, so there are a total of 103 filled ASA positions and 41 chief
state's attorneys.
Chief SAs.
Yes,
So
yes,
that's
Mr. Chair.
41 and 103 equals 144.
Yep.
So of that universe of 144, 42 received raises.
And so let me be clear though, Mr. Chair, when we asked for the,
Madam
oh,
State's
I'm sorry, I
Attorney.
apologize.
Yep, I just want to get to the heart of the question, please. There are 144
currently.
Right. 42 of those individuals, 42 of those pins received permanent raises last December.
So I want us to be careful. That's what I was trying to explain. At the time that they received them, that was last year, right? So there may have been 146 or 150 attorneys where 42 of them actually received the raises. The number of 144 is present. That's the current number. That's not the number that we utilized in November and December when we eliminate those positions to increase their salaries.
Got it. Very helpful. So at the beginning of the year, how many ASAs and chief ASA positions were filled versus what's filled today, to your point?
So what I can say is this is the data that you have is the most recent and current data that we have. And so these are the current filled positions, current vacant positions that we are utilizing with DHR and BBMR to increase the salaries. It's 144 filled positions.
Very, very helpful. What I'm hoping to get at is what is the number of positions that we have today, which you've answered, 144. How many ASA and chief SA positions were filled at the beginning of the fiscal year?
at the beginning of the fiscal year, that's something that wasn't in the letter, but we can find that information out and give it to you.
Do we have an estimate?
I don't. That wasn't the requisite sort of criteria. We didn't know that we had to be prepared to give you that number from the beginning of that fiscal year, but we can provide that to you if we have it. Do we have that?
I think we can cobble that together. It may not be precise. You'd have to give me a fixed date in time, like July 1, 2021, for example.
Sure.
Is that what you want to know, July 30th?
I would say
November 1st? Yeah.
I mean, the beginning of the fiscal year for both the city of Baltimore and the agency is July 1st. So
Right.
July 1 of 2021.
We can do our best. I don't know that it'll be precise, but we can get I think we might be able to get pretty close.
Okay.
We will try.
And the other thing is that we did utilize numbers from the last fiscal cycle to give you a comparison of our supervisors and the current vacancy rate from last year versus this year. But we can do that additional sort of analysis for you.
Excellent. I'll come back to that if I need the requests. I appreciate the offer. Last question before I move on to my colleagues. And colleagues, when we move on to questions, we're going to focus on the letter first. And then once we have exhausted questions on the letter, can get into other areas of the services of this agency. Of the 42 individuals that received the raises back in December, and I'm assuming those probably didn't go into effect till early January, I'm guessing, because it takes some time on the processing side for DHR and BAPS. But of those 42, do we know how many of those 42 are still with the agency?
No, but we can find out. I mean, I have no problem following up and giving you that information.
Great. So colleagues, we're going to stick with a line of questioning around the components of the letter. So I'm going to open up the floor. Councilman Stokes.
Hello, Madam
How are you,
SAO.
Councilman?
I'm glad you mentioned, because we had hearings here with other agencies, DPW, sanitation, rec and parks, and pay scales is a problem, shortage of employees. So my question is, your employees that you have now, can you provide us the pins of those employees you have now?
So yeah, I mean, we can provide you the pins. We provided in the letter the names of the individuals. That's not a problem. We can go back to our administration. If you guys need the pins of those individuals, not a
And the
problem.
ones that are filled and the ones that are not filled.
Yep, no, not a problem.
Ms. Karen, you get that request. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councilman Conway. I'm just going to go down the line and then down this line next.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam State's Attorney, for replying to the letter. It was really helpful to kind of get your perspective on what we see to be the issues and keeping folks on. As the chair alluded to, this is an issue we're seeing across the city.
Right.
So no surprise. And I want to take the opportunity, realizing that, of course, your work is incredibly important to the safety, or rather the follow-through on our police department. So I want to dig a little more into some of those questions. Nothing crazy, but so Mr. Chair asked a lot of my questions. One of the things I was curious about is, have you considered outsourcing any of the legal work possibly? Is that something that's an available option?
So no, I have not considered outsourcing my attorneys. Again, what we've done is to try to prioritize, understanding that we weren't sure or certain how long this pandemic was going to last or how long the court closures were going to exist. They ended up being in place for 2 years. We didn't anticipate that, but we did anticipate a backlog. And so what we've attempted to do was to say, okay, coming out of this global pandemic, we have to prioritize violent crime cases. And so what we've attempted to do as an office is to ensure that those violent crime units are fully staffed. And so what that has done, though, is, as I stated with the case volume, there's a significant decrease in the number of cases that we are no longer prosecuting. It has allowed us to reallocate those resources to ensure that we are focusing on violent crime and working with the police department to solve violent crime and to prosecute violent crime. And so that's what you'll see among the numbers. Yes, we do still, I'm not going in any way, form, or fashion saying that we need to freeze the positions that are vacant in our office. We want to be able to fill those positions. We're actively attempting to recruit for those positions, but those positions are in district court, not I'm not in my homicide or my felony units and my violent crime units.
I appreciate it. And I don't know, has that ever been done before? Is that a wild idea?
Yes.
Or it has?
And let me just be very clear, the rotational sort of system that we've developed and where we're actually asking for supervisors and, you know, some of our senior attorneys to step in and to take district court dockets, that has been done under previous administrations. I worked under Mrs. Jessamy, then also under Greg Bernstein. We did that then, we're doing it again. And I think that this is not something that is permanent. It's just temporary until we can get those individuals that we are hoping to recruit and to retain in our office.
Got it, thank you. Another question, and this is something that has also come up across all city agencies, considering that we continue to see folks leave the city, have you thought about succession planning and to find a way to break up some of the problems that happen when attorneys do leave? How do we approach that generally?
So I didn't get your question. So what's your question?
Strictly succession planning. It's an issue that we've talked about with our city agencies across the board, DPW, DOT, you name it. We're all having that issue. And namely that when you have folks leave, all the things that they know go with them.
I agree.
All of that brain drain or that knowledge, that insight, especially for more senior folks, can really have a tug on a lot of the other work that's left behind. Have you guys considered, or do we have, or have we begun to think about a succession plan?
So, I mean, this is a major issue, Councilman, and this is one of the reasons why I brought it to the attention of the City Council and to the Mayor and to BBMR and to DHR. You know, this is a problem. I'm competing with 4 state's attorneys that have left my office in Hartford, Howard, Anne Arundel, and I can't even, in Prince George's. Like I'm competing with state attorneys. We now have different additional sort of local prosecutorial powers in the Attorney General's office. They're paying them more. I'm competing with the Attorney General, and I'm competing with private practice. And so what we've attempted to do is to understand and recognize that my office has the most talented attorneys, which is why everybody recruits from us, but we've also want to be competitive. And so we understood that, which is why we went to the flexible work schedule, not just for my attorneys, but for the support staff who are the foundation of the office. Everybody works in the office 3 days a week and at home 2 days a week. We did that because we wanted to be competitive. We went and asked to use our surplus. We went and asked to increase the budget. We've done all of our due diligence to try to be competitive, and we're at a point right now where we are at a loss as to how we can compete. The people that you see right here are dedicated public servants who have been committed to this office, and it's not because of the pay, and it's not because of the work-life balance, and it's not because they're not tired coming out of this pandemic and want to spend time with their children. They're just committed to the citizens of Baltimore City. And so what I want to be able to do is dispel any sort of myth or rumors or misinformation that is intentionally perpetuated about my office, because these are the dedicated servants of the office of the state's attorney that have been there through the turmoil of the uprising, through the consent decree, through the corrupt scandals of the police department, through the pandemic. And they stay here because they're committed to the citizens of Baltimore. So when you ask for a succession plan, I'm asking for support to ensure that we keep these hardworking individuals who are in this room right here and stay committed to the city of Baltimore.
I appreciate. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I have one question to sort of follow up on that, if it's okay.
Yep.
When you went to HR to do that analysis, did we do an assessment of salaries for folks in the region? Of course, incorporating in some way, shape, or form DC, specifically in the public sector, to see, because we of course know that generally the salaries in the private sector are significantly higher. We all know that. I mean, we all go through that as well. That's not what brings us to this work. Have we looked at specifically in the public sector, and what are we seeing so far as those rates?
Yes, and I would say DHR has their own analysis and their own criteria to Mr. Chair's point, that they made the assessment, an independent assessment outside of what we were able to determine. We left that to them, and what they found is that other agencies received increases, and unfortunately, my agency did not. Even despite the fact that we've had a surplus, we've tightened our belts, we cross our T's, we dot our I's every single year to put ourselves in a position where if we're not awarded and afforded the opportunity to give merit increases, we might be able to make the argument to still give increases. Unfortunately, with the pandemic and the deficit, the surplus went to the general fund of other agencies, and it did not come back to us. And so that has been a problem for me and for my attorneys that you see before you today.
Is what I'm referring to the same as what the chair asked for? Is that the same information, specifically that sort of analysis looking at
that criteria? Yes. And DHR actually mentions the fact that other agencies have gotten an increase in pay and my agency has not.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Cohen. Again, colleagues, we're just focusing on the questions in the letter and the responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no questions related to the letter, but look forward to further questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Dorsey.
Same.
Councilman Glover.
Same.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ramos. Same. Councilwoman Porter.
Same.
Council Vice President Middleton.
Same.
Councilwoman McCray. Same. Thank you very much. So it looks like as of the July 1st request is not necessary. So as of so today, there are currently 5 chief state's attorney vacancies. Back on July 1st, there were 4. And there are currently 42 ASA vacancies. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Is that right?
May 19th as of the date.
I think that's a date that you requested.
Yep.
In your letter.
May 19th. As of May 19th, these numbers.
And they're probably, we've hired since May 19th.
Yeah, right.
To be honest with you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So that number's probably increased.
And on July 1st, there were 8 ASA vacancies. Is that correct?
July
1st of 2021, there were 8 ASA vacancies.
I don't know. I haven't crunched. I don't know how many vacancies.
Mr. Chair, where are you getting that number from?
That's coming from budget pin data from the budget office from BBMR.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, what? Couldn't tell you.
Okay. If the agency could please follow up with the number of vacancies in both of those classifications, the chief SA as well as the ASA position, what the total number of vacancies were on July 1st, just to confirm so we
July 1st of last year?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we can gather that data. We don't keep that data. I can tell you.
BMR probably does.
Or I don't know who does in the city. I mean, what I can tell you, I think you asked for the number of vacancies as of July 1, 2021, or the number of people who left between July 1st and now. But the number of vacancies as of the beginning of the fiscal year is not data we maintain.
Okay. And that would,
Maggie
please,
Keenan.
your name, yep.
Maggie Keenan, BBMR. We have that data, so we can forward that to you, and I'll send that to you too, as well.
Thank you.
Both of you.
Great. So Sophia and Nate and Maggie, is that something that we can get by call of business tomorrow?
Oh, yeah.
All right. And I'm looking for the number of vacancies in the chief state's attorney position. In addition, the number of vacancies in the ASA position.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can you help me clarify, when was the date that the 42 positions received the pay increase because of the closed out positions?
So I don't know that anyone in this room can say the exact specific day. However, the decision was made in early December of 2021, and it went into effect right after, so it may have taken 1 or 2 pay periods. So I would say on or around end of December of 2021 to be safe, plus or minus 2 weeks.
But we had to make a request and get approval, so that process started actually in November.
Right.
Of last year.
The request was approved. The decision was made to move forward with that action in early December of, and let me jump to Maggie for a second. Is that December 9th of?
No, the decision was made earlier than that.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
When was it determined that the action would take place to eliminate the 5 pins and redistribute the $536,000 to the 42 ASAs and chief SAs?
Late October.
That was made in late October.
I thought
Yes.
so.
And I also just want to clarify, it was probably a miscommunication, but we didn't eliminate those pins, so they were frozen.
Oh, okay.
Those were not eliminated.
They were frozen. So if they ever want to be filled in the future, it's an easier process.
Yep. That's good to know. We were willing to abolish them. They weren't abolished, and they were frozen. Good news.
Ms. Blake or Ms. Mosby, can you tell me what the following classification is? There's also something known as a chief state's attorney lead. Is that a supervisor for chief state's attorneys?
We tried to figure that out. The chief state's attorney lead, we've come to the conclusion that chief state's attorney lead is the same as a chief state's attorney. And we utilize the chief state's attorneys for our division chiefs and for our team captains. So they exercise some capacity in a supervisorial sort of role.
So Mr. Bajorkland, Ms. Lipscomb, Ms. Newman, they essentially serve as what we all know to be chief SAs, correct?
They have a special pin in that they're not even chief state's attorneys. They are actually classified as, what are they, Camille? What are they?
Chief state's attorney leads. We have
They're
3
chief
of them.
state's attorney. They're deputies. Those are deputy state's attorneys. So they're my executive team.
So they're essentially the supervisors, if you will, to the chief state's attorneys, correct?
In essence, yes.
Plus or minus
yes.
in the org chart. Okay, that's very helpful. I'm going to go on, and I've got a couple more questions on this, but Councilman Stokes?
Madam State's Attorney, you had mentioned that you had requested some ARPA funds, and you had not heard back because of, some salaries you couldn't use it for that. My question is, you haven't heard back. Was there a reason why? Did they give you the reason why they said no?
Unfortunately, we did not receive a reason or justification as to why we could not utilize our surplus or why there wouldn't be additional funds, despite the DHR recommendation that we increase the salaries of our attorneys. So we took it upon ourselves to do what needed to be done to ensure the increase of those salaries so that we could retain our attorneys. That's essentially what's happening right now, is we're taking it upon ourselves to figure out how we can increase the salaries of those individuals that the city desperately needs in these critical positions.
Nate and Nina, can we get a request, Nate and Nina, from the mayor's office of reason why the ARPA money was, I guess, denied? I don't know what the question would be, but you never heard back.
Well, the ARPA money we were told we couldn't use for salaries. So what we did was, in light of our policies, where we stopped prosecuting minor offenses that we believe have nothing to do with public safety, we understood the need for behavioral sort of, agencies to be able to come in and meet the needs of the community and meet the needs of the individuals. And so we asked for there to be a surplus and an infusion in those behavioral health organizations, recognizing that people still live in communities where these are public nuisances and need these issues addressed. And so we were very specific in our requests. We have several sort of partner agencies that we announced when we announced the permanency of our policies, and those were the agencies that we asked for support and funding, and we made a recommendation to the mayor's office to ensure that we did.
Madam Seal, can you give us that request, and I can have Nate and Nina kind of hear that so we can check on that for
Absolutely,
you?
absolutely.
Can you go ahead and give us what the request was? I know you were talking about mental health. Can you?
Yes, we can provide you a copy of the letter that we sent to the mayor's office.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Conway?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam State's Attorney, I'll be honest with you. It's, of course, tough to have conversations, so I'll be blunt. I want to work toward resolving issues that I've heard about. And so I'm going to ask you a question that I'm asking because I want to figure out how we can be helpful. And I think it ties to what we're discussing here. So my question is, I've heard of rumors of ASAs not showing up for cases or for bail reviews. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there, how often it's happened, and what we've been doing to address those issues?
So what I can tell you is, quite candidly, we're 6 weeks from my election. Okay, so a lot of the misinformation that is being intentionally peddled through the media is just wrong, and it's intentional. I can tell you my prosecutors work their, excuse my French, butts off every single day, get into these courtrooms, deal with judges that aren't always cooperative, victims that aren't always cooperative, with a voluminous case docket. And so the majority of my prosecutors are doing their due diligence, which is reflective in the numbers, guys. So I know that, you guys are looking into the efficiencies and inefficiencies of agencies based off of the staffing, but if you look at our numbers, we are still producing, which is why you guys get the conviction alerts on your cell phones. When we look at the data from our interactive data dashboard, you can see the no pros, the arrest, the conviction, the demographic information. And the data would suggest that my prosecutors, and this is our role, right? We have a crime control and prevention division. We have a conviction integrity division. We have a lot of units that other prosecutors' offices across the country do not have. But at the end of the day, our accountability is counted in the courtroom. I've worked with 5 police commissioners and 4 mayors. I work with 5 different commissioners, 5 different crime plans, 5 different command staff to do what needs to be done. But my job is to ensure accountability in the courtroom. And that's what these prosecutors do every single day. And so when you ask about the failure of a prosecutor to show up for bail reviews, that doesn't happen. Maybe it's happened once or maybe even twice, but on a regular basis, these prosecutors are led by these individuals in this room who are committed to this office outside of me being the state's attorney, and who have been dedicated to this office, some of them for decades. And so I would say that the majority of my prosecutors are doing their due diligence, and the data would suggest that's the case.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And so you're suggesting...
Councilman, are you going to switch topics, or are you staying on that? Because Councilwoman Porter has a quick follow-up to that question, but if you're staying on it, I'll stay with you. I'll come right back to you if you're going somewhere else.
Sure, you can go ahead.
Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam State's
How are
Attorney.
you?
I did have a follow-up question with
Sure.
that regarding just mentorship and technical assistance for junior level state's attorneys. I know that you do a lot with that. Can you share some of the strategies that you've implemented, and how not only are the attorneys being mentored, but also they're being able to kind of have that vast education and workflow? Because one of the things that to be quite candid with you, some of the issues that I'm having with many of the agencies is about the quality of the work. And so making sure that we are investing in the workforce to implement and execute high quality work all the time. Not to saying that your state's attorneys are not, but
Right.
just challenging agency heads to really think through workforce and operations, because of course, throughout the city of Baltimore, there is a morale issue.
I agree with you.
There is a morale issue, and so we have to begin to start asking those types of questions and demanding answers from our agency heads so that we can keep quality talent here in the city.
No, and I appreciate that question, Councilwoman. One of the things that we've attempted to do, and I think I've addressed this issue with the council before previously, is we have mandatory sort of training sessions. And pre-COVID, we were talking about racial disparities and trauma-informed services that we need to provide to our victims and witnesses of crime. all of which we do on a mandated sort of basis for the entirety of the office. We also have set up, you guys were introduced to Michael Leedy, who is the training director, a senior prosecutor who has worked in the office for a very long time, someone who is very well respected in the legal community, who has set up an awesome sort of training program for our junior prosecutors, also understanding and recognizing that with these vacancies, the turnover, we're moving junior prosecutors through the system a lot more fast, like a lot quicker. And so what we have established is that we have our senior, and this is why the supervisors are so important, our senior staff who are going in, second chairing cases with our prosecutors. We've established a training program for every division now. We didn't necessarily have that before. We had like a boot camp training for our junior prosecutors where they went through it and then you're kind of thrown into the fire. That's part of what happens in Baltimore City, but we are not doing that any longer, where we are actually having a training session for every division throughout the agency. And then the final thing that we're doing to ensure that we are properly preparing our junior prosecutors is that we've created, thanks to Darren O'Brien and his team, he's the director of my management information systems. He's done an outstanding job where we've created a checklist, and we're getting ready to launch this. We're really, really, really excited for every single prosecutor to be able to go through so that we don't have any mishaps or there's nothing that falls, between the cracks and we miss anything. There's no missteps in place where we go through and they have to go through a checklist to say, did you check this? Did you look for this? Did you do this? And so we're really excited about the implementation of that as well.
No, I thank you for that, and I appreciate the expanded explanation. I will share, given the level of vacancy within your office, I am greatly concerned, as I know you are, as the leader of this agency, with regard to like staffing and different things like that. And so, thank you for that explanation.
And Councilwoman, let me just be very clear too. I mean, I think again, I emphasized this in the opening remarks, is that like this is a problem that's not just being faced by my office. I know I'm on the ballot, so that's what everybody wants to pay attention to. But if we look at DPW, they have 652 vacancies out of 2,041. That's a 32% vacancy rate. You look at Department of Transportation, 263 out of 1,085. That's a 24% vacancy rate. Recs and Parks, we're talking about 74 out of 307, 24% vacancy rate. Baltimore Police Department, we're talking about a 17% vacancy rate. Baltimore Fire Department, we're talking about 10%. And so when you look at our office, we're talking about 73 out of the 192, we're talking about a 24% vacancy rate, which is consistent with all of the city agencies. So yes, we have to do better, but in order to do better, we have to address the pay parity issues, the work-life balance, and this pandemic malaise that every city agency, not just throughout this city, but nationally, are currently experiencing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilman Conway.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I think what you alluded to was a little bit of what I was asking for about the succession planning and how we're thinking about building leaders, and so that's really helpful. Thank you, Councilwoman. And I think part of the reason why I'm just jumping into it is I think it's important to understand, one, we see how this is affecting us across the city. We've got significant problems in some of our agencies, such that right now we don't have recycling regularly. And this is a big sticking point in one of our earlier meetings. And so you're not alone here. And I think what I think it's incumbent upon us as a council to do is think about, as we should strategically look at this budget, envisioning what we should be doing to think about that in a better way. So the other question I have, is my second question, is with regards to null pros and static cases, and if we've seen any issues there recently as a result of some of the pandemic issues and our vacancy.
So again, and all of this data, I can provide this to you guys additionally, but it's published on our website. It's been consistent with the past 10 years. Our no pros data, we're not no prosing or dismissing more cases than my predecessor. It's been pretty much consistent. And even with the policies, there's no need to no pros them because we're not prosecuting them, right? But what we have learned as a result of Johns Hopkins, who did did an independent study, is that 80% of the individuals that have averted arrest would have been black people, and 1% of those individuals, which were the target population, have actually reoffended. When you look at the statewide recidivism rate, which is about 40%, you can see how significantly our policies are not attributing to, despite the city being in crisis, not attributing to the violent crime.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions on the letter? Cohen, Dorsey, Glover, Ramos, Porter, Middleton, McCrae? Thank you. Ms. Mosby, can you talk through you had mentioned the competitiveness of the positions. Can you talk through the average salary for Baltimore City SAO for entry level for an ASA versus our sister counties, and let's include Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County, and Howard County?
So the one thing I can tell you, it's about approximately, and Camille would have the exact figure, it's about starting salary is about $73,000. What ends up happening is that we will start ASAs in Baltimore City, and because they get the experience that they do, voluminous case dockage, trial experience, what ends up happening is that when other people recruit my prosecutors, they recruit them from a lateral perspective. They're not recruiting them from their base pay as an entry-level attorney, so I'm not certain what their pay scale is, but they're able to bring them in at a higher salary than I brought them in, and I'm constrained to, being able to give them a 5% raise or a merit increase if we have the general fund budget to be able to do it. So what often happens is if you have Anne Arundel County or Howard County, Harford County, or Prince George's County, they will come in, and I would say it's not even my colleagues that are doing this the most, it's the Attorney General's office. And this is something that I testified about in Annapolis. I said, was going to present an issue, testified to the legislators and said, in Baltimore City, this is going to be a major problem because they can go across the street and they can deal with the same types of cases that they have experienced with, but they're going to get an additional higher salary with a less of a caseload. And it's gonna be problematic for our city exclusively. And so I'm on the record as saying that, and that's one of the biggest problems that we have. As I stated, out of the 14 individuals that have recently left in the past 3 months, 5 of those individuals went to the Attorney General's office. And so it's problematic, but I knew it was gonna be problematic, and this was something that we brought to the attention of the legislators when they enacted these laws.
Thank you, and I did see that note in the report. It was interesting to see where the recent attrition, where those folks ended up. I just want to take a moment to go back to my original question. Do we have a comparison of the entry-level pay for?
I can get it for you, Mr. Chair. I can find out for you, but
Yeah,
I don't have it.
That would be really helpful. Do you think that's something you could provide reasonably by call of business tomorrow?
Can we? You said what? We can certainly try to get it to you as soon as possible.
How about by call of business Friday? Is that reasonable?
Friday. She's my boss. I gotta defer.
Everyone has a boss, I understand.
We can certainly try and find, if it's publicly available, what the entry-level salaries are for ASAs and other jurisdictions.
Even if we just did the 4 from the other prosecutors' offices.
We will absolutely make every effort to get that for you.
Great.
What jurisdictions you want? Anne Arundel, Howard, Baltimore County, Montgomery?
Hartford.
No, let's do Anne Arundel, Baltimore County, and Hartford County, or Howard County.
Howard County.
Howard. Let me repeat that once more. That's Howard, Anne Arundel, and Baltimore.
We can get that to you, Mr.
Yep.
Chair.
And I'm going to make a dual ask here of BBMR. Maggie, if your team could also research that, because I know Bob's in frequent touch and collaborates with his counterparts. Councilman Glover, you have a follow-up on that one?
I was going to say that I think it's best that we reach out to the jurisdictions that have hired those employees from the Office of the State's Attorney, as opposed to us making a comparison to like Baltimore County and things of that nature. I want to make sure that those ASAs that were with the Office of the State's Attorney that moved on to become state's attorneys in those counties that went back to the Office of the State's Attorney and hired those individuals. I want to make sure that we make a comparison there.
I love that suggestion, Councilman. So I'm going to modify my request. What I'm going to include in the universe is Baltimore and Anne Arundel County to start, just because they're both geographically adjacent. And then the counties where you had attrition too, what were those counties again that you referenced?
It's Howard, Hartford, Anne Arundel, and Prince George's.
Okay, so let's do, I'm going to get to you in 1 second. Let's do Baltimore County, Anne Arundel, Howard, Hartford, and Prince George's. Does that sound right? And Councilman Conway?
And the state.
And the state.
And Attorney General's office, because that's the major.
I think that's what Councilman Conway is referring to, right? Okay. One question I suspect you know the answer to, like the back of your hand, is what is the starting salary for an ASA in Baltimore City?
$73,484.
$73,484. Okay. All right, excellent. You good?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So 73, 40, I'm just going to say 73.5. We can all agree on that.
It's below 500,000.
Please, don't do it. She's technical.
It'd be 73.
Told you, we're tightening up.
It was 73,484.
73.
So I'll say 73,400. Is that fair?
No.
I mean, 73,400. Sure, fine.
I appreciate the attention to detail, ma'am. So let's, can we agree 73.4 for the sake of conversation during tonight's hearing? Thank you. So you had mentioned you wanted to see an increase in salaries kind of across the board. What is your desired starting salary for ASAs in order for you to be competitive?
Actually, Councilman, we have a whole sort of plan outlined by unit, what the increases should be and how they should be reflected, and we provided that to DHR, but we'd be happy to turn it over to you as well.
That'd be great. Is that something you can provide
by unit?
By call of business tomorrow? Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already have the plan in place that we submitted to DHR, and that's based off of a set of criteria, based off of experience, trials, the unit, the workload, and so yes, we can provide that to you by tomorrow.
Excellent, thank you. Nate and Nina or Sophia, you guys got that? All right, I have two last questions on the letter. Can you talk to me about what your priority is for the vacant positions? Because there's a number of vacant positions, but some got to get filled before the other ones. And then what that strategy is for filling those positions?
So our priority is always going to be violent crime. And so we want to fully staff, and you can see from the numbers, some of our violent crime units are staffed more than they were last year. We want to focus on homicides, our gun violence enforcement division, which are our non-fatal shootings, our repeat sort of gun offenders. We're focusing a lot on our felonies. We have a number of carjackings and armed robberies that we prioritize. So our felony units are the priority. What we have right now, after our policies have been implemented, which you can see from the caseload has directly resulted in a decrease in cases, is with the redistribution of those resources and staff and personnel. We want to continue to staff our felony units. However, we also want to be able to staff the district court. And the district court cases that currently exist are more serious than they were pre-pandemic before our policies, right? It's not just a marijuana case now. When you talk about the cases that currently exist in district court, we're talking about victim crimes. And we don't want to diminish those victim crimes, whether it's an assault or whether it's a theft or whether it's a burglary. And so right now, from a prioritization perspective, we're going to focus on felony crime, but we are still actively recruiting through the career fairs, through the law schools, doing whatever we can. We have a, what is the LinkedIn and through all of the career sites, we want to actively recruit, but we will be recruiting for junior prosecutors to come into our district court where they will handle more serious cases, but not as serious as those felony cases.
Got it. Thank you very much. Colleagues, any other questions on the letter before we get into general questions? There was an email sent by the director of the ARPA office stating that there was not a formal request made to the recovery office. I'm assuming that you all checked in with them to determine if what you were seeking was an eligible expense, and they said no. Is that the case?
So yes, and I can call up Jen. Do you want to talk to that about the ARPA?
Yeah, this is
not being able to provide that for funds, for salaries, and then we ended up asking for and issuing, and we can give you a copy of the letter that we sent.
So let me just frame the question appropriately, if I may. There has been significant concern raised by the committee and council members as a whole around ARPA funding requests and decisions that have been made, or I forget the appropriate terminology, but may not yet have been made, applications that are under review. So we're asking every single agency that comes in front of us, every single large agency, what have you applied for in terms, explain to us your ARPA applications that you've made, and explain to us which ones have been approved by the administration versus those that have been denied versus those that are still under review, if you will. So if you could please address that.
And I just want to be very clear, like our understanding of the ARPA funding was that we were not eligible for it based off of salary increases. So what we did is to draft a letter to the mayor to say, hey, by the way, these are quality of life issues that need to be addressed. We would love for these agencies to be infused with that cash to be able to meet the behavioral health needs of the individuals in those communities. But I can, Jen, you can add whatever I missed.
You can move that, pull that mic down if you want. Yeah.
So I don't have much to add outside of what she added, and our chief of administration can speak better to the reason as to specifically what we were told in regards to what we could apply for. And in light of that, we could not meet our most paramount need, as discussed, the staffing issues and the pay parity. We sent a letter requesting to fund those organizations that she's already spoken about. And that's where our request ended. We didn't tell us we weren't.
So you submitted a letter to the ARPA office requesting
to the mayor's office.
To the mayor's office. Did you send a letter to the ARPA office?
We spoke with folks in Muncie in regards to those efforts. That was just a quick phone call. That was prior to our sending the letter, so that we could better understand the application process as we spoke with our partners. So in case they had questions for us, but that was the end of that.
So just to clarify, you were not seeking ARPA funding from the ARPA office, you were seeking ARPA funding through the grants, you were seeking ARPA funding through the Muncie chain of funding, because we've learned.
Yes, it was just part of a collaborative conversation, which is why I shared that was all.
Okay, so it was not a formal request. You did not submit an application?
No, we did not submit an application with ARPA.
Councilman Stokes?
And I just want to clear it up that I made it, I said denied, and I want to correct that, because if it didn't go through ARPA funds, then naturally it would be. Now you said you didn't send it through there. You had a conversation and you sent a letter. I just want to clear that up because I got an email.
Both. Let me be clear. We did both. So she had a conversation with Monty to figure out what the process was. We weren't told that we needed to submit the request through ARPA. We sent it through the mayor because we knew that he had discretion in allocating the funds. And so what we did was to say, Mr. Mayor, these are where we think that you should distribute some of these funds.
So your letter went to the mayor particularly, but you
Yes.
never got a response back.
No, we didn't get a response, correct?
Thank you.
Correct. We did not get a response. And for clarity, we would have been on that. Our ask was on behalf of other agencies, so we would not have been the ones to submit the applications.
Okay, just to close out this line of questioning, can you please provide us with a copy of the letter?
Absolutely.
By call of business tomorrow?
Yep.
Thank you so much. The last thing on the letter, we had asked a question around, Councilman Glover.
I just wanted to say that, you know, they can't apply for nonprofit money through the organization. They wouldn't be able to do it. It has to come directly from the mayor's office.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Councilman Glover, you're spot on. I think there may be some confusion around the process, which this certainly wouldn't be the first agency, and I suspect will not be the last agency around the ARPA process itself, as well as the, I don't want to call it dual, but separate track of funding that's been made available through MONSE to nonprofits. So there's nonprofits that are getting it through the ARPA or applying through the ARPA office. There are nonprofits applying through MONSE directly, and then there are agencies that are applying through the ARPA office. And part of the reason why I asked that question was because I checked the list of all of the ARPA applications that we received, and I've been checking that every hearing to better understand if what the agencies are telling us is matching up with what. But spot on. Thank you. Councilwoman Porter, did you have something to add, I think?
No, sir. I'm sorry. No, sir. I don't have anything to add. I just want to I just wanted to clarify. This is not a separate nonprofit money. This is a set pot of money coming through an office, and so just wanted to clear that up. So, Councilman Glover, to your point, yeah. Sorry.
So the last question I have on the letter, and perhaps I missed it, and if I did, I sincerely regret that. I had included a snippet that said victim services. The SAO plays a critical role in deploying victim services. Please be fully prepared to discuss your full staffing model, all challenges, and what resources you need to ensure victim services are being performed comprehensively. So if I missed that in the letter, please let me know and direct my attention to it. If not, it's certainly fine if you could just address that right here.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I'm willing to address it, and I have my Chief of Victim Witness Services here as well if you have any additional questions. But as you're aware, we prioritize...
Ms. Mosby?
Yes.
I'm just going to ask, give me for the sake of time, why don't you give me the 2-minute summary, and then
I
if any of
promise.
our
I'm giving you
colleagues-
2-minute summary. It's not long. It's 30 seconds. How about that? We have prioritized victims and witnesses throughout the past 7 years, as you're aware. In fact, our victim witness services, we've doubled the size of the unit. We have victim witness advocates in every single division throughout the agency. That did not exist before. That has allowed us to, in essence, increase the services that we provide to victims and witnesses by 95% since the start of my administration. We have actually already serviced 52,972 victims and witnesses of crime. We've offered 7,745 grief counseling sessions. We have the only family bereavement center in the entire state of Maryland where we offer a lifetime grief counseling to the next of kin for those that have been impacted by homicide. And we've relocated over 1,048 families. And this is the thing that I think is highly relevant to the council in light of the fact that you guys will also have funding sort of priorities at some point and the ability to reallocate funds, I think following this fiscal year. But we've secured $8.9 million in grant funds to better protect victims and witnesses of crime. It did not come through the general fund. This came as a result of us applying for additional federal and state grants to be able to better protect and serve victims and witnesses of crime. So when you ask what are the needs of victims and witnesses, I would say, like, we cannot always rely on these grant funds to be able to employ these divisions that are critical to public safety.
Thank you. And can you briefly discuss the staffing model, what positions, vacancies, what you're looking to do there?
So we can, do you have anything to add? If not, RC, it's okay. We can provide you the staffing and the vacancies for the victim witness unit, but we don't have the same sort of retention and recruitment issues that we have from an assistant state's attorney position in our victim and witness services division. Like I said, right now, we have a victim advocate for every single division throughout our office, and I can provide you the exact numbers.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I would say.
I would say I don't even know if we have any vacancies in the victim witness. Do you want to come up? If I could defer, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon. Good
Mike,
evening.
Mike, you gotta get closer to the mic. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Okay, good evening. We currently have a unit that has subunits of dedicated advocates, therapists, as well as relocation specialists. Currently, we have vacancies. We have one vacancy in our special victim witness unit, and we also have a vacancy for a child therapist currently. So those are the two vacancies that we have currently in the unit. Currently, we have a staff of approximately 30, and that would comprise of the advocates, the therapists, and the relocation specialists.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any questions on that before we open up the floor for? Hold on.
Councilwoman.
Hold on. Council, this is a follow-up on this question, correct? Okay. Councilwoman Ramos and then Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you?
Mike. See, council members do it too. It's all
Sorry
week
about
long.
that. Could you repeat the number of families that you've helped? You said that earlier.
Relocated?
Yes.
It's 1,048.
Just in the last fiscal year?
Mike, everyone, Mike.
It's 1,048, yes. And that's as of, that was, yes, last fiscal year. And that is as of, I believe, what's that date, Jen? We put it in the annual report. It has to be, it's more than that, but that is based off of our annual report, which is probably March of this year.
And my understanding is that you generally run out of money because there are so many people that are in need. Do you know what the backlog is?
So what I can tell you is we have not run out of money for the relocation services. What we were grateful to receive from this council is additional funds, understanding that we were running out of money a couple of years ago. You guys gave an additional amount of money for us to be able to better serve those that we need to relocate. So we got additional funds from you, and like I said, we've gotten additional funds from our efforts from the grant perspective.
So you're able to support everybody who is asking for this?
Yes.
Okay. And this is for victims and witnesses, so it's domestic violence, it's everybody that under that umbrella.
Correct. That would qualify for relocation services. And there's a set criteria that we set for those individuals when we actually relocate them. But yes, there's a whole analysis and a process that we go through, and those are the individuals that we've been able to successfully
Income-based?
relocate.
Is it based on their situation?
It's based on a number of factors, and RC can go into some of the relocation factors, but you're gonna look at the heinousness of the offense, you're gonna look at the need for the urgency of the request, you're gonna look at some of the issues surrounding the particular circumstances of the individual, whether they're already on public housing, whether there are other sort of safety issues that are considered. But if I missed anything, do you wanna add anything, RC?
Also, some of the factors are whether or not the victim or witness is currently threatened by the defendant or by members of the defendant's family or affiliation, whether or not there's gang affiliation involved in the particular case. So those are other factors. And also
That's
we
fine.
rely. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a sense of the criteria. I don't need full details, but I appreciate that, so
But it's
thank
not
you.
something that we automatically just, will approve. It's a criteria that we have set.
And the criteria is set because, well, that's fine. I think that answers my question. That's all I had on that.
Thank you, Councilwoman. We've also been joined by Councilman James Torrance, 7th District. Councilman Glover?
It was just kind of follow up. I know I heard you mention that you was down one child social worker. I just wanted to know, just by being down one child social worker, the other social workers that you do have there now, are they able to also assist those children?
Yes, and RC can speak to our partnership with Child Abuse Center.
Yes. Currently, the two licensed social. Okay, I'm sorry. Currently, the two licensed social workers, the therapists that we have on staff, currently they provide counseling to adult survivors of homicide as well as families. So if we have a family where a child or children have been affected or witnessed a homicide, then we right now refer out to our partner, which is the LifeBridge Center of Hope. We do have a partnership with them, and they are able to see those children currently until we get a dedicated child therapist again.
And it's Childhood Center of Hope, but also the Baltimore Children, what is it?
Child Abuse.
Child Abuse Center, the Baltimore Child Abuse Center. But they're located in the Center of Hope.
That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. We're going to start with Council Vice, and now we're in general questions. Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I just want to start off too by, just sitting here watching your advocacy for your prosecutors and all the other people that work in your, the different offices. Your advocacy for them means a lot. We're here in our 5th day, and as you stated, yes, just about every single agency had something to say about, their shortage in staffing and so on. So you are right on line with their needs. You have always been a state's attorney that always found innovative ways in educating our youth and working with our older adults, and you came up with the idea of pop-ups, and you're always there advocating at places where families and children go that need services, and just helping them to understand what the state's attorney's office is all about. And I thank you for that. So I guess one of my questions, with these new innovative ideas that you always do, are you capturing, or do you have any new innovative things that you want to share that you have captured as far as data with some of these places in your travels and needs of what you see out there, particularly for our youth?
So I appreciate the question, Madam Vice President. The one thing that you guys know about me, I presented numerous times, especially Councilman Cohen, is ways in which we can holistically attack this crime issue and get to young people and break that school to prison pipeline, get to them before they get to the criminal justice system. That's been a priority of my administration. We have the only, and I'm going to repeat, the only crime control and prevention division out of a state's attorney's office with a youth coordinator that is dedicated to 3 youth programs. As you've mentioned, we have our Great Expectations program where we focus on 4th and 5th graders. We adopt 3 schools every school year. We've touched more than 500, and you asked for data, 580 young people through that program. You guys can remember when we had Officer Friendly in our schools. We had a rapport with law enforcement. We go in once a month to the 4th and 5th graders, and we try to focus on behavioral issue schools, individuals where the young people have behavioral issues. But we go in once a month and we expose them to public service careers. And so we'll bring in judges, we'll bring in police, we'll bring in the fire, we'll bring in council folks. We just want them to be engaged. And we've touched more than 580 young people through that program. We have our Junior State's Attorney program. This is where we pin the young people, and they are actually pinned junior state's attorneys. We actually do it here in the City Hall. We've touched more than 300 young people through that program in the past 7 years. We usually take about 30 to 45 young people. And they start in the 911 call center, the evidence control room, Foxtrot, Federal Circuit, District Court, and at the culmination of the 6 weeks in the summertime, when our young people don't have much to do, we actually do a mock trial competition at the University of Baltimore School of Law, where they can then see themselves as judges and prosecutors and police. For the past 4 years, we've partnered with the Mayor's Office of Employment Development to actually pay those young people to be a part of the program, and we get applicants from all over. But the data you asked about was 95% of those junior state's attorneys have graduated from high school, are in college, or on a career track, and 33% of those young people are actually in a field of criminal justice. So we try to track them, we invite them back to work with the young people. And then last but certainly not least, our summer pop-up series is going to begin. We just had an announcement 2 weeks ago, well, maybe last week, where they're gonna begin. We usually do it for 12 weeks. Friday nights, when we know there's a drastic increase in youth violence between the hours of 7 and 9 o'clock. That's based off of data. So for the past 6 years, we've been going out and ensuring that we had something productive for these young people, whether it's bowling or laser tag or skating. And then we brought in the infusion, because the first event that we had more than 500 young people, plus their parents that showed up to the event, and understanding the need to provide services to those families. So we'll bring in, city services and other folks to be able to provide the needs of the parents, but also ensuring that we're doing something positive and productive for those young people so that they're not out on the streets and being unproductive. We're gonna do that this year. We've expanded it from 12 weeks to 14 weeks, and it starts on June 24th. We're gonna have a concert by a number of local celebrity artists that they're gonna give a free concert to our young people over in the War Memorial.
Thank you. And I guess just one final comment. You had mentioned you've been through 5 mayors. I think it's a few of us on the council that have also been through those 5 mayors, and you have been consistent in following the track of your innovative ways and getting that message out of people understanding what the state's attorney's office is all about, and sharing that with our youth as well as our older adults. And I'll stop there.
I appreciate that, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Councilwoman Ramos, and then Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam State's Attorney, how many people do you have in all of your staff that speak Spanish or Latino?
So I can tell you that we have, out of our victim witness, do you know off the top of your head, RC, how many we have as victim advocates? Do you? And I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head. I know that we have some attorneys that are bilingual, but I can get that information for you.
Yeah,
I know
do
our victim
remember-
advocates we particularly try to target.
Yes, I particularly remember Evelyn Vargas in your office. Obviously she's a rock star, but our population's growing, so I'm encouraging all of our agencies to do better in hiring for our population.
Right. Thank you. There's about 5 advocates in the victim witness unit that speak Spanish.
Yeah, and again, it's a big deal because domestic violence is very high in our community. So it's really important that we have people who understand the culture around that as well.
Yes, and Councilwoman Ramos, also with regards to domestic violence, we have a bilingual domestic violence advocate housed at North Avenue. So we do have our Spanish-speaking domestic violence advocate there. as well.
And I would just note that we did not have any bilingual advocates prior to this administration, but what we have seen during the pandemic is a drastic sort of increase in domestic violence issues. And so this is something that is a concerted sort of effort by my team to ensure that we recruit individuals and that everybody can feel safe and comforted when they come to the state's attorney's office and feel heard. I think that that's a priority for us.
Right, and the attorneys as well. So maybe that's a formal request if we can get that when you get a chance.
Bilingual?
Yeah.
We don't ask that question, but we can try to find that out. I don't know if we'll be able to get it by tomorrow, but.
Oh, no, I don't need it tomorrow, but.
Okay, yes.
That would be.
Also, I'd like to mention that we do have another.
Get closer to the mic. Get closer to the mic, yeah. Sorry.
Another Spanish-speaking.
Mike. Yep,
Sorry.
there you go.
We also have another Spanish-speaking advocate in special victims as well in the felony division. So we have one in misdemeanor, we have one in felony as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you understanding the importance of how that that's especially since our population is growing and we have such more unique needs, I think. So thank you.
And that's also indicative of our immigration policies, right? The policies that we have that I've instructed my prosecutors to be cognizant of their discretion and their decision making, especially when it comes to these immigration issues in light of the former administration and even the current administration that I thought would be different. But I think that these are considerations that we make on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Cohen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam State's Attorney. Mazel tov on your daughter's graduation.
Yeah.
Great ceremony.
Great job today.
Thank you. I did want to thank Andrea Curley from your office for the quick relocation of a child who was shot. Really horrific, traumatizing event, and she moved very expeditiously to get that family relocated, and so I appreciate that. Did want to ask, given the devastating violence that our city faces and the staffing challenges in your agency, do you believe continuing to try Keith Davis Jr. for a 5th time is the best use of our severely limited resources, budget, and staff power?
So what I will say is that Andrea Curley is one of our community liaisons. I'm very proud of her.
Apologies if I called her Andrea.
It's okay, Andrea, it's fine. And she's excellent. She's not only the face of the office, but she's the voice of the community back to the office, which is an incredibly important role, which is why I'm happy that it wasn't your council, but the previous council allowed us to re-implement those positions. So yes, they are very much needed. So when you ask me about the staffing, the one thing I will say is I'm presented with the same issues as every other agency, as you can clearly tell. But when you look at the data, my office still has a 90% conviction rate. We're doing our due diligence, and what we should be measured by is what we do in the courtroom. And every day, my prosecutors are getting in there and doing what they need to do in the courtroom. When it comes to fighting for the victims of crime in the city of Baltimore, the name that matters to me is Kevin Jones. That's who we're fighting for, and that's who I will continue to fight for, because this was an innocent man who didn't deserve to die, and I'm going to ensure that those that we believe are accountable for that are held accountable. And so I can just tell you that the same way that I advocate for every victim of homicide in the city of Baltimore is the same way that I'm going to advocate for Kevin Jones. That's the name that should resonate, not only for that family, but for this council.
No, and I understand concern for victims, but are you concerned, though, that continuing to try Keith Davis Jr. after 4 previous attempts, making him the 2nd most tried person in American history?
That's a lie. I'm sorry, you should check your facts. That's not true.
I'm sorry, what's the lie?
That he's the 2nd most tried person in America. That's not true. So you should check your facts. I know that the media perpetuates that misinformation, but that's not true.
Folks, Councilman Cohen,
Yep.
Hold on. Ms. Mosby, Councilman has the floor, so please let him speak. Councilman Cohen, please ask the question without context. Thank you.
Yep. So in this context, given our limited resources, our limited staffing, given our limited ability to prosecute cases, just given the crunch that all of our attorneys are under, that all of us are under, is it worth the resources to try the same person for 5 times, or would it be better to just free Keith Davis at this point?
So I just want to say, and this is an open and pending matter, that this individual has been convicted 3 times, right? So that's 36 individuals who have weighed the evidence and not looked at a blog and made a determination about the credibility or the substantive value of the case based off of misinformation. 36 individuals have found him guilty. And so what I'm going to do and what I will continue to do is what I do for every victim in the city of Baltimore, and that's to fight for Kevin Jones and his family, who did not deserve to die over $12. So yes, I'm going to pursue him the same way I do any violent repeat offender.
Were any of those convictions upheld?
They were. They were.
All right.
The first. You should do your homework.
Excuse me. We are going to focus on the budget proposal that is in front of us, and we are going to focus on the letter that was sent and the response that was received. I feel that it would be outside of the scope of the committee's authority to go any further down this line of questioning. Councilman Cohen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I did want to put in a word of defense for the media in our city. It is election time. Everyone is charged up. However, I think we have some really good journalists here in Baltimore. There have been stories recently from the Banner, the Sun, Newsweek, about some of the staffing shortages. And one quote from a actual person, not an anonymous source, but a former attorney from your office, Michael Turriello, mentions that it's been a threat to public safety for years. I want to be very, very clear about this. It is impossible to do the job with that few people at that level. It is absolutely dangerous. The concern that I have, that I think many folks share, is with staffing levels, when you have a former staff member that is saying it is so depleted that it is dangerous, the concern is, how are we immediately, and I know the ARPA question, and I appreciate the challenges there, but how are we immediately recruiting? Are we talking to, I know that attorneys have been taking some of our folks from other jurisdictions. You mentioned the Attorney General. Are we recruiting from all sorts of different places? How are we filling those vacancies in the very immediate term?
I'm just trying to understand your question. I just want to be clear about what your question is, because you went on for quite a bit. You are asking, what is our recruitment efforts? I think that we went over some of that. So I just want to be clear before I begin to answer what your question actually is.
That is my question is, so we are losing to other jurisdictions. Are we gaining from other jurisdictions? How are we?
We absolutely are gaining from other jurisdictions. I think that you went down the path of suggesting that the Baltimore Banner and some of the news media, you were also defending them. My only point in highlighting the media was that there's a great deal of misinformation that was reported in the media. You now have the actual numbers, not the theoretical, hypothetical sort of scenarios that were posed by anonymous individuals that are supporting my opponents. You have the actual information for you to make an informed decision about what makes sense and what doesn't. And so I would assume that you would be able to do that. But I can tell you my recruitment efforts are such that I've already explained. We're recruiting through career fairs and law schools. We are doing our due diligence. Yes, we've received applications from other jurisdictions, but the way that our office is being portrayed, the misinformation, is not helping to allow us to actively recruit in a way that we should be. And so that's why I made mention of the media, not to villainize anybody, right? I get your whole point around you're Trump-esque, want to defend them, but what I will say is that there's misinformation in each of those articles that you've cited that you now have accurate information for you to make an informed decision about.
Let me ask the question in a different way. So the supposition is that we are essentially being poached by other jurisdictions, the AG, et cetera. Are we poaching from other states? Are we poaching from, and you mentioned job fairs, you mentioned recruitment from law schools, et cetera. But given the, again, sort of immediacy of all the violence
need to fill the positions
that we're seeing, are we counter poaching?
It's really hard to counter poach if our attorneys are underpaid. So that is why I brought this to the attention of the council and to you today, right? We have to address that first level before we attempt to recruit anybody else, because they look at the paper, they look at the banner, the misinformation that's put out there by the Baltimore Sun and anybody else, and they're not trying to work here because they understand that they're going to be overworked and underpaid. So what I'm asking the council, in light of the fact that you guys are going to have the power to be able to redistribute funds and do what needs to be done, I'm asking you to merely follow the city Department of Human Resources recommendation and pay my attorneys what they're deserved. And then we can talk about where we poach and where we solicit and where we can get and recruit other attorneys to come here. Until that happens, I think that we're at the same place, and I don't think that you can put this on anybody else but ourselves if we're not going to collectively figure out a way to ensure compensation for the attorneys that are doing their due diligence to do their job every day.
Understand that. When we looked at the budget books, every agency produces their reports. Almost every agency produces metrics on performance.
Yep. So do we.
They were not in the budget book.
No, because we're not required.
Guys, hang on. Let's take a deep breath and pause. One person has the floor in this room at a time, period. So let's start over. Councilman, I want you to ask your question, please finish without interruption, and then I want to let the state's attorney answer your question without interruption, and vice versa. Councilman Cohen.
So there were not performance metrics in our budget books, and so wanted to understand, as we're talking about giving ASAs raises, which I agree, folks are underpaid. However, we are, and our mayor, this city council, everyone is trying to move toward, and I'm sure your agency as well, toward performance-based budgeting, outcomes-based budgeting. And so to not have performance metrics in the budget books is a challenge. And so wanted to know, as you all prepared the agency report, where those were.
So if you haven't already received it, you should have received it, because we sent it to you electronically and also in person to your office, our cumulative annual report. And I'm sure that BBMR can speak to you as to why there are no performance metrics in the book. As you may or may not understand, I'm an independently elected official, and I'm not required to utilize the performance metrics of the mayor. Right? He doesn't set my performance metrics. We set my performance metrics. And so we would be happy to provide you with a criteria by which we utilize for our performance metrics, but they're not going to be in the budget book because I don't report to the mayor. What we can do for you is to provide you what we utilize for our merit increases that we have not been able to utilize due to the deficit of the general sort of fund, even though we were in a surplus. So I'd be happy to provide that to you. Is that what you're asking me to do?
Yeah, Madam State's Attorney, I fully understand that you do not work for the mayor.
Okay, so that's why it wouldn't be in the budget book. That wouldn't be in the budget book.
Okay, everyone stop. The only people that will speak are the people that are recognized by the chair. The chair recognizes the state's attorney. Please let me know when you're finished, and I will recognize someone else on the board.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I appreciate it. Performance metrics would not be in the budget book. They never are, never have been, never will. I don't report to the mayor. We have our own metrics by which we increase our salaries and we determine our performance metrics. We'd be happy to share them with you.
Chair recognizes Councilman Cohen.
That would be great. Would
Yep,
appreciate
great.
that as follow-up from Nina and from your office.
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Madam State's Attorney, let me just gather my thoughts, please.
Mike,
Sorry.
and moving forward, no one else is speaking in chambers until they're recognized by the chair. Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam State's Attorney, let me just gather my thoughts here. With regard to your public health response to your office, understandably, totally understand the public health response in theory. Can you share some immediate actions that your office has taken in regards to youth diversion of some of the hardest reached individuals, some of the individuals that may or may not go to your youth pop-up events, they may or may not come in contact with your office. Can you share those community engagement strategies that your community liaisons are doing? In addition to that, I have a follow-up question, so I'll let you answer that question, then I'll ask my follow-up question.
Chair recognizes State's Attorney Mosby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your question, Madam Councilwoman. We do have the Crime Control and Prevention Division. One of the programs that we have out of the Crime Control and Prevention Division is our Aim to Be More program. This is a program that we started in 2015. It's for first-time felony drug offenders that are facing 20 years or more incarceration. They go through a probationary period where they learn life skills, they learn job training skills, they do community service, and at the end of that probationary period, they're given a job and their felony records are wiped clean. I can tell you that this is a program that we have had, and where is Angel? Did you want to come up and talk about it a little bit more?
Madam State's Attorney, who is this?
This is the director for our Crime Control and Prevention Division,
last
Mr.
name?
Chair. Can she speak?
Last name?
Angel White.
Chair recognizes Ms. White.
Good evening. To date, we have served 157 participants. The average age range is 18 to 24 years of age. Since the inception of the program, we have gone from holding a 3-year probation to a 2-year probation. Because studies have shown that shortening the probation allows them to be more successful and the recidivism rate will decrease.
I appreciate
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. And when we're talking about the larger perspective of the city, what are some of your community engagement strategies for those hard to reach population? Like, you know, let's be quite frank here. There are some youth and young adults that are not connected to city services. They're not kind of engaged with city services. And so those are the youth and young adults that we want to target when we're talking about some of these youth diversion programs, specifically from a public health approach. So if you can comment about how your office is kind of engaging those hard to reach youth and young adults.
Chair recognizes Ms. Mosby.
Did you want to talk about it? No? Did you? No? So the one thing I will say, we do that, Councilwoman, through our Aim to Be More program, and we also do that by way of our Crime Control and Prevention Division. That's the extent at which, I mean, we partner with MONSE, we partner with other agencies. I know that we have the gun violence reduction strategy that we're employing, and one of the things that we're attempting is almost like the ceasefire approach, where these are individuals that have been identified as main players, and we give them the stick or the carrot. So we coordinate and attempt to collaborate with other agencies to get to those additional individuals, but by way of crime control and prevention, we only have those 3 programs. So we have the Great Expectations program that focuses on 4th and 5th graders. We have the Junior State's Attorney program that focuses on 9th and 10th graders. And then we have the pop-ups, which focus on just young people overall, where we just want to get them off the streets of Baltimore during those increases in violent crime.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Madam State's Attorney. My second question was having to do with an assessment. I've often commented, about the assessment of city agencies in order to kind of house some of those behavioral health, substance abuse services that you are, that you're pushing forth with regard to your public health approach. Has there ever been an assessment done from your office in relation to those social services from city agencies?
So yes, I mean
Chair recognizes Ms. Mosby.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. My bad.
Sorry.
But yes, we've done an assessment, which is one of the reasons why we put together that letter for the mayor when it came to the ARPA funding. We have partnered, when we made our policies permanent, there were particular sort of behavioral health organizations that we partnered with. So you have the Baltimore Crisis Response Incorporated, we have Baltimore Safe Haven, we have I don't have all of them at the top of my head memorized. Turnaround, we had Baltimore, I said Safe Haven already. I said BCRI. 211, Maryland 211, BHSB. There were a number of organizations that are actually doing the work, and that when we went out into the community and we were doing our virtual sessions and when we were coming in person to kind of meet with folks, there was a need and a demand that people are like, okay, you're no longer prosecuting these offenses. What are we doing about it? And so what we wanted to be able to really do is to get the behavioral health experts to be able to meet the behavioral needs of the individual and of that community. So whether it's mental health issues, homelessness, substance use disorder, we are addressing those needs directly, and the best way to be able to do it is to utilize those that are experts in that field. My office is not an expert, but we can make the referrals, and that's what we've attempted to do.
And so,
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. With regards to those referrals, and this is my last question, with regards to those referrals, how many of those referrals were actually reoffenders within a 12 to 18 month period?
And Johns Hopkins did a separate analysis.
Yeah.
It was less than 1%.
Thank you.
Less than 1% reoffended.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Porter.
Yeah, I read the study, but there were significant limitations with that study. So that's why I'm asking, does your office carry any type of data with regard to those reoffenses?
No,
Chair recognizes Ms. Mosby.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did not. We relied upon Johns Hopkins, who did their independent sort of study on it. I mean, because we wanted the value of the study to come from an independent agency as opposed to our agency. We don't collect that information.
And the only
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Porter.
Sorry. And the only reason why I bring that up is because I'm challenging, again, agency heads to really develop performance metrics that are based on quality as opposed to quantity. So elevating the quality of life, not only for the individual that is offending, but also for the quality of life for the community as well.
And I appreciate that.
Chair recognizes Ms. Mosby.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. But when it comes to the performance metrics, again, I'm not going to measure my prosecutors based off of their referrals outside of the courtroom. Mm-hmm. When it comes to accountability, what I'm asking folks to measure our success upon is what we do inside of the courtroom every single day. And that would be something that falls outside of the scope of the courtroom. However, we understand the need to be able to address that issue holistically. And so we're still doing that. But the measure of what we do on a day-to-day basis and accountability should be measured by what we do in those courts.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman
And that's what we
Porter.
base our metrics off of.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you. And so when we're talking about recidivism, that's what your performance, okay. So that would be, so the logic pathway that I'm thinking about is the public health services, the wraparound services connected to the recidivism. And so that is a performance metric of your office.
So
Chair recognizes Ms. Mosby.
Thank you. So not necessarily the performance metrics are going to be measured off of an external agency and whether or not they provide services, right? What would be something that we would consider is whether or not my prosecutor had the intent to make the referral. What happens when you make the referral goes way beyond the purview of what we do. And so what we're saying is, hey, understanding that justice is not black and white, and that your discretion is going to have collateral consequences on our community. These are considerations that you need to make when exercising your discretion. And yes, this is a consideration that we're going to make when you are making a day-to-day decision. But the majority of what we're determining is going to be based off of what you do in preparation for putting that case on in court. And so that's what our performance metrics are really based off of, not based off of whether or not they made the referral and the agency actually followed up, because that would be something that would, again, fall outside the scope of our purview. But it is a consideration that we make.
Yeah.
Hang on. Councilwoman Porter, if I may go to Council Vice President Middleton for an immediate follow-up, and then I'll come back to you. Chair recognizes Council Vice President Middleton.
I just want to make a matter of record statement that the Department of Human Resources implemented the performance records or matrix system, and then they stalled it, and this affected not only this agency, but most of the agencies. So this is, this has put really a negative light on all of those city agencies. And I just want to say that as far as we're talking about this office, that I think they've been doing a phenomenal job with the staff that they do have. But the important key here is that Human Resources stopped it and stalled. And it's the same thing that's happening to just about every agency in our system.
So,
and I just want to make one last comment.
One second. So, before I recognize Councilwoman Porter, we're going to go back to normal protocol for the hearing. Councilwoman Porter, the floor is yours. Please give her an opportunity to finish. Then you can comment, and then we'll go on to the next council member. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Porter.
And the only reason why I expressed that, ma'am, is that it's not just your particular agency, but public safety agencies in general. When we're providing social services, we need to make sure that we have the agencies that are supporting you all in that public health response that you're trying, that you're attempting to do. And so when you tie or even connect a public health response into what you're doing as far as prosecutorial discretion, we need to make sure that we have said fertile ground to house those people, because if not, then we're going to begin to see those people actually reoccurring and reoffending back out on the street. And so those are some of the issues. That's why I'm bringing up this question. We need to make sure that in order for us to have said policy, we need to have, from an agency and a city perspective, the fertile ground to support, the public health response that you're trying to do, not just with the state's attorney's office, but with MONSE, with BPD. We need to make sure that that happens.
I agree, Councilwoman, and that was one of the reasons why we felt compelled to write the letter to the mayor to say, hey, these are some services that we can provide to ensure that we're meeting the needs, the behavioral health needs of the individuals in the community. But I agree, there has to be that coordination, and then, on my part, I'm saying I'm not going to criminalize it, so let's coordinate and ensure what are we going to do to address those needs.
Councilwoman, you good?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Conway, and then we're going to Councilman Glover after.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam State's Attorney, I was curious, one of the things I know you've spoken to is the many fewer people that we're prosecuting as a result of the policy change. I was curious, to your point with liquidating positions, do we need those positions if we are prosecuting fewer people?
So we absolutely need those positions because what we have, like I said, right now, because we're not prosecuting minor offenses like trespassing, marijuana, drug possession, we are still prosecuting distribution, is that there's a definite sort of demand. We have more, the cases that do currently exist in district court have more to do with victim crimes, right? So you're talking about your burglaries, you're talking about your second-degree assaults, you're talking about where carry transport of a handgun, which is a misdemeanor offense, right? These are the offenses that currently exist in district court, and in no way, form, or fashion are we attempting to minimize these charges, but when it comes to a prioritization, we're gonna go for, and I need to ensure that my staff is fully staffed for carjackings and armed robberies and non-fatal shootings and homicides. So we are actively recruiting and soliciting to fill the positions for those second-degree assaults, for those burglaries, and those small, I don't want to, again, diminish these offenses, but when it comes to a level of prioritization, we're going to make sure that my homicide unit is fully staffed before the district court. And so that's what we're currently recruiting for, those district court positions.
And do those positions require more experienced attorneys?
No. Those district court positions is where you start out as a junior prosecutor. So what needs to be in place is the proper training and supervisors and the ability to try a case. You learn courtroom decorum and docket management. These are all sort of the fundamentals of being an attorney, and that's why we're recruiting the junior prosecutors out of that division.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say, you know, I'm excited to be where I'm at right now because I was on the other end and worked in the office of the state's attorney. So it feels good. Like early on when I talked about DPW, I worked in DPW. So I just want to say that what I see here in the stands are a lot of individuals that were there when I was working at the office of the state's attorney. And it's good to see that they're still present working in the office of the state's attorney. I see the liaisons that are here that's always bringing that information back to the office of the state's attorney. I see a lot of the attorneys that are also out volunteering their time that don't get paid after work at these pop-ups. I see these attorneys here that are also spending their own money to donate to those pop-ups. And I'm not just saying that because I was a former worker and I want to, you know, big up the office of the state's attorney. I'm saying it because I know these to be facts. I'm saying it because I was that mentor that worked with those young men in the Aim to Be More program for first-time nonviolent felony drug offenders. I was there to see that this individual that came from being homeless to being enrolled in BCCC from the office of the state's attorney is one of those individuals that's now working in the office of the state's attorney. So what I'm saying to the council is, because I've been on both sides of the aisle, is that these individuals are doing the work in the office. And what I'm saying to the mayor's office is, Nina still here? Hey, Nina, all right. So what I'm saying is the monies that they are asking for through ARPA, that we make sure that they are getting them. Because these monies are going to these kids that some are dealing with mental health issues. As she mentioned earlier today, they're the only prosecutorial office in the state that have a youth coordinator. So we are getting to our young people before they get to the criminal justice system, which is very, very important. This is a all hands on deck approach. Each and every last one of us need to do our job to make sure that we are all in this together and that Baltimore as a whole doesn't fail. So what I'm saying to my colleagues is to look a little deeper into the office of the state's attorney and not let's go off the rhetoric that we hear on social media at times, from the media at times, but let's do our own personal homework to get the results and the news and the answers that we need. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just me commenting on the great work that these attorneys are doing. And as the state's attorney mentioned early on, I just happen to be a part of that work environment where we've seen a lot of individuals run for political office and moved on to other jurisdictions. And I've also heard these attorneys tell me personally, when I worked in district court, that they get the best training here in Baltimore. And what they do is that by getting the best training here in Baltimore, they leave and take those talents elsewhere. And what we're left to do is to recruit individuals all over again because they get the best training out of the office of the state's attorney. So again, I'm saying that we dig deeper, we look into the reasons why these individuals are leaving, again, because they've all ran for public office, and they came back and recruited those individuals from the office of the state's attorney. As you guys very well know, we have a colleague, Issy Schleifler, who ran for city council. He's now on the city council. Me, myself, I ran for city council. I'm now on the city council, and we all come from the office of the state's attorney. So those individuals that left, such as myself and my colleague, our colleague, Issy Schleifler, they had to be replaced with other liaisons. So what I'm saying is that let's be patient and let's give them the monies that they deserve so they can recruit and keep those talented attorneys that everybody is coming to Baltimore to grab. Thank you for this opportunity, and Mr. Chair, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilman Glover. Councilman Torrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Madam State's Attorney. I have a few follow-ups to Councilwoman Porter's actual statement. I just wanted to know about your diversionary programs. Are we issuing stats or are we issuing non-pros for those individuals? Because
I'm sorry, you said immigration.
are we issuing stats or are we issuing non-pros for those individuals?
Or what?
They're going through like aim to be more and others so that we can keep track of the data.
Or no pros. I'm sorry, I wasn't
pros
following.
or,
oh, okay. No, we enter no process, and then we actually move to expunge the records.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because if you were issuing stat, we'll be able to track the data better. But if you're issuing non-pros,
the stats would be placed on the inactive docket for 3 years. The actual no process is dismissal, and then we actually move to have the record expunged.
Okay. And then can I ask you the criteria for the diversionary programs as well?
So which ones?
Each one of them for the public's understanding, because with the programs, each one has a criteria, and I think that the public should know what the criteria are.
Yeah, we absolutely. Angel, do you want to get up here? Mr. Chair, may I?
Good evening again. I'm also happy to share this information with you after this hearing. But for the Aim to Be More Diversion program, we recruit through the courts. And so it's for first-time nonviolent drug offenders, ages 18 to 24. We don't take anyone who have committed a violent crime. Did that answer your question? I mean, it's pretty much the young adult diversion program for first-time nonviolent drug offenders. And we do have a full process that we just updated our manual. We can share that information with you.
Yes, but also as a clarification, wearing and carrying is not a violent crime technically.
You said what?
Wearing and carrying wearing and carrying and transporting of a handgun is technically not classified as a violent crime, correct?
Yeah, that wouldn't be qualified for our Aim to Be More program. So it has to be a drug distribution case, right? Like we're only looking at individuals that are charged with distribution or attempted distribution. So you're looking at 20 years incarceration. Those are typically the charges that we use for the diversion program.
Okay, I would love to see the stats on the program and the success rate of the
Sure, we can provide that to you.
Thank you. Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a quick request. Are you able to, and would you provide to us the percentage of cases of youth tried as adults and the percentage of cases where you request to hold without bail?
So what we would be able to provide is not necessarily the youth charge as adults, because as you know, that's based off of statute, right? So if you're charged with any sort of offense that has a life sentence, it could be from rape to murder to armed carjacking, that you can be charged statutorily, that has nothing to do with us, automatically as an adult, as a child, right? What we do keep track of and what we can provide you is what we put on our website, which is the individuals that have been sent back as a result of the 5 elements that they argue in front of a judge as to whether or not that person should be waived back down to the juvenile system. Now, Dawn, did you want to speak more to what we collect from a statistic perspective and what we can provide to the councilman? But a lot of, I believe what you're looking for is what we already provide on our website. But did you want to speak at all to what we collect? If not, okay. But yeah, we provide what you're asking for on our website. We'd be happy to send a direct email to you.
Great. If I have a follow-up question about that in particular, I'll send that to you via email. On the other point, cases where you're requesting hold without bail.
Oh, you said hold without bail?
Yes.
Okay. That's separate and apart. Where's Patrick? Is he here? No, he's not here. Okay. So yeah, I think we can let you know. I can just tell you that as a result of and let me give you the stats because you asked. Give me 1 second. As you are aware, if you may or may not be aware, but we also started a sentencing review unit where we actually assess and modify, make sentence recommendations for individuals that have served time, lengthy sentences and given excessive sentences. We started that in December of 2020. But since our policies have been implemented, the average number of people who have entered the criminal justice system when we first started in 2019 was 23,244. In 2021, the number was 13,645. That's a drop of 41%. We are not in any way, form, or fashion only attributing that drop to our policies. We know there are other sort of external factors that may also be at play, but I think that that's incredibly important. The number of people incarcerated in prison in Baltimore City, sentenced individuals, has dropped from 3,952 people at the start of my term in 2015 to 552, which is at the end of 2021, which is an almost 800% reduction. Variables for these two data points include the low-level policies, of course, COVID, the consent decree, and other factors, but we would be happy to provide you that additional information, Councilman, for the held without bail.
Yeah,
so the individuals, I just want to preface this, that the individuals that are currently going and where we ask for them to be held without bail have nothing to do with these sort of minor offenses. The individuals that we're asking for them to be held with bail, without bail, are the individuals, these are more serious offenses at this point. Because we filtered out the others.
Just the numbers.
Yeah, no, I'll get that.
That's all I'm looking for. Mr. Chair, one other question here.
Hang on 1 second. Nina, do you have the previous request from Councilman Dorsey? Nina, are you good? Thank you. Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that the shutdown of courts for a couple of years has had a significant impact on the volume of outcomes or however. But can you tell me how many human trafficking prosecutions your office secured in 2020, 2021, and to date in 2022 in terms of the fiscal year?
So you want the exact number of human trafficking cases that we have resulted in from 2020 to 2022. Michelle, do you have any of those numbers off the top of your head?
I don't even
Because I'd be happy to provide that to you, following this meeting, but if you have anything that would provide context for the councilman, that would be great. We do hold that offense very high, in high regard.
Good evening.
Microphone, please, and you can pull it down, ma'am. Thank you.
Good evening. I don't have the exact figures in front of me. I wasn't prepared to provide them, but I just want to clarify. Human trafficking prosecutions include cases where people are criminally charged with crimes and pending before the court, and also active investigations that we work in conjunction with the Baltimore City Police Department, HSI, and FBI. So the numbers that come before the court, and we would certainly have to look into those statistics, they don't represent all of the human trafficking cases. We are still actively building many cases. We have secured convictions during the pandemic for a few human trafficking cases that we were able to resolve by way of plea, despite the numerous shutdowns by the court. But the figures, when we focus on prosecution, is not only the charged cases, but the cases that we are actively investigating. And finally, we also work in conjunction with our federal partners. So while a person may be under investigation for human trafficking by Baltimore City Police Department, we regularly meet with our partners at the U.S. Attorney's Office and other allied agencies to determine whether the appropriate agency for prosecution is the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office or whether it is the U.S. Attorney's Office. And sometimes we work in conjunction. A defendant may be charged federally with human trafficking crimes and also be facing crimes on the state level for sex offense related charges.
Great. So I'm just looking for...
Councilman Dorsey, real quick. Councilman Torrance has a follow-up on that specific response.
So wait, we don't have any prosecutors in the state's attorney's office that are federally sworn as well? I remember Pat Jessamy had that at one time, where there were about 2 prosecutors that worked directly with...
That's not what she said.
Hang on. Let's Councilman, ask your question.
So I remember a previous state's attorney, and this is just me asking a clarifying question, not an attack, that there were persons who worked closely, two ASAs that worked closely with the federal DOJ, who were helping to build the cases to then transfer to the federal government. We don't have that same system here. I'm just making sure I understand.
No, that's incorrect. We have a designated human trafficking prosecutor. We also have within the Special Victims Unit, we also have other prosecutors within the Special Victims Unit that also assist with investigations. In addition, the Juvenile Unit assists us sometimes with identifying victims of human trafficking. And with respect to the specially designated human trafficking prosecutor, she works in close conjunction with the U.S. Attorney's Office at all times, in addition to our other allied partners in BPD, HSI, and the FBI, to determine which cases will be handled on a state level and federal level. So we are always, you cannot do human trafficking prosecution and not be in contact and constant communication with your federal partners, because I'm sure, as all of you know, human traffickers often do not limit their activity to one jurisdiction, whether that is in the state. They often may be trafficking in Baltimore City, but often overlapping in other jurisdictions within the state, which means that we also have to be in contact with the Attorney General's office, who handles multi-jurisdictional prosecution within the state of Maryland. In addition, human traffickers move nationally, and so therefore, if we have a case here, we may have victims here, but there may be victims in other states, or the trafficker may have taken the same individuals to multiple states, and therefore, we have to work with our federal partners. So our dedicated prosecutor is in communication with all of the agencies that I identified. I even left out the Maryland State Police. So there is that connection.
Councilman Torrance, you good with that follow-up? Thank you. Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you. Yeah, so I appreciate you illuminating the difference between prosecuting to secure a conviction through trial versus concluding through plea. Can you provide the numbers for the last 3 full years, fiscal 20, 21, 22, on both of those?
Certainly, we will attempt to provide numbers with respect to the cases that are currently charged criminally, cases that are currently investigations, but I would caution the council that those numbers do not necessarily represent the cases that started off on a state level and were then given to our federal partners, and they also do not represent the cases that may have started off with our office and then were ultimately handled by the Attorney General's office. But we will certainly do our best to provide you with full and thorough information regarding all human trafficking cases.
So cases that concluded through your office in each of the last 3 fiscal years, including this current one, to year to date, which almost concluding.
Would you like concluded or also still ongoing? Because in light
No,
of the
concluded.
pandemic, there still are many cases that started during the time frame you referenced, but they're still ongoing.
I'd like cases that have concluded.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, the courts have been shut down for 2 years, so I just want to make sure that we preface that with the open investigations and have you.
That is how I preceded my comment and my question. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Okay, seeing as there are none, thank you all. We're now in recess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Council.
8:54 p.m. We will be back at 9 p.m. sharp for the Sheriff's Office. Immediately following that will be the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. Thank you.